Long before the grand spires of Ayutthaya rose above the floodplains of central Siam, the land was a shifting mosaic of cultures, kingdoms, and rival polities. To understand the founding of Ayutthaya in the mid-14th century, we must first look to what came before: the decline of great powers, the emergence of new societies, and the slow formation of a uniquely Siamese identity. For centuries, the dominant power in mainland Southeast Asia had been the Khmer Empire. Based in Angkor, in what is now modern-day Cambodia, the Khmer rulers had built monumental cities and irrigation networks, spreading their influence across much of the region. At its peak, around the 12th century, the Khmer Empire extended into present-day Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. However, by the late 13th century, this once mighty empire was in decline. The reasons for this decline were complex. Prolonged internal instability, succession disputes, and military pressures from neighboring powers weakened the Khmer state. Additionally, environmental strain, possibly due to overextended water management systems, may have contributed to Angkor's diminishing capacity to sustain its population and infrastructure. As Khmer authority faltered, its hold over peripheral territories, especially in the Chao Phraya River basin, began to loosen. Into this vacuum stepped new players, the Thai peoples. Originating from the southern regions of modern-day China, the Thai had gradually migrated southward over centuries, settling throughout mainland Southeast Asia. By the 13th century, they had begun forming their own polities, often by adapting the administrative systems and religious practices of their predecessors. One of the earliest and most influential of these emerging Thai kingdoms was Sukhothai. Founded around the year 1238, Sukhothai began as a vassal to the Khmer, but eventually asserted its independence under the leadership of Seventeenth-century. His successor, Ramkhamhaeng the Great, ruled from approximately 1279 to 1327 and is often remembered as a foundational figure in Thai history. Ramkhamhaeng expanded Sukhothai's territory, promoted Theravada Buddhism, and is traditionally credited with creating the Thai script. His court became a center for religious and cultural exchange, attracting scholars and monks from as far as Sri Lanka. Sukhothai portrayed itself as a benevolent and moral kingdom, with the king likened to a father figure, an image reinforced by later Thai chronicles. Yet, Sukhothai's influence, while culturally significant, would prove politically short-lived. After Ramkhamhaeng's death, the kingdom fragmented under the rule of his successors. Regional lords grew increasingly autonomous, and Sukhothai's hold over its vassals weakened. This fragmentation opened the way for rival centers of power to emerge. Further south, in the lower Chao Phraya Valley, the ancient city of Lavo, modern-day Lopburi, played a key transitional role. Historically a stronghold of Dvaravati and later Khmer influence, Lavo was strategically located between the northern highlands and the Gulf of Siam. By the early 14th century, it had become an important center of political and economic activity under a mixed population of Mon, Khmer, and Thai elites. Around this same time, a new settlement was beginning to rise in importance at the confluence of three rivers, the Chao Phraya, the Lopburi, and the Pa Sak. This site, rich in freshwater access and fertile land, was ideal for trade, transport, and agriculture. According to later chronicles, it was here that a leader named U Thong emerged as a powerful figure. Little is definitively known about U Thong's origins, though some sources suggest he may have had connections to Chinese or Mon trading communities. What is more certain is that he was a leader of substantial influence. He married into the ruling family of Suphanafum, a nearby city-state, thereby strengthening his political position. By the year 1351, U Thong formally established a new capital at this riverine location, naming it Ayutthaya. He declared himself king under the title Ramathibodi I. The choice of the name Ayutthaya was deliberate. It referenced Ayodhya, the legendary city of Rama in Indian epic tradition, thereby linking the new kingdom to a broader Indic cultural heritage and spiritual legitimacy. Ramathibodi I immediately set about consolidating his authority. He introduced a legal code based on a combination of Thai customs and existing Khmer law, blending local governance with broader administrative principles. He also adopted Theravada Buddhism as the official state religion, reflecting the growing influence of Sinhalese monastic traditions in the region. This move not only distinguished Ayutthaya from its Mahayana-influenced Khmer predecessors, but also helped to unify diverse populations under a shared spiritual framework. The emergence of Ayutthaya was not a sudden rupture, but rather the culmination of evolving regional dynamics. It represented a synthesis of influences: Khmer architecture, Mon literacy, Indianized cosmology, and Thai political culture. Its location at the heart of a river network gave it control over key trade routes and access to international commerce with China, India, and eventually the Islamic and European worlds. In the year 1351, a leader named U Thong established a new capital in the lowland heart of the Chao Phraya basin. This settlement would grow into one of the most influential cities in Southeast Asian history. Named Ayutthaya after the legendary Indian city of Ayodhya, this new capital was not just a political creation, but a carefully designed cultural statement. With it, U Thong announced the arrival of a new kingdom that would eventually dominate the region for more than 4 centuries. U Thong's rise to power was shaped by the geopolitical complexity of the early 14th century. Positioned among weakened but still influential states, Sukhothai to the north, Lavo to the east, and various Mon and Khmer centers throughout the region, U Thong had to navigate a landscape filled with rival claimants and shifting alliances. His strength lay not only in military capability, but in his ability to unify multiple ethnic groups and cultural traditions under a new political identity. Upon founding Ayutthaya, U Thong adopted the royal title Ramathibodi I. The choice of this name was symbolic. It linked the new ruler to the mythological King Rama of Hindu epic tradition, a move that imbued his authority with cosmic significance. This act of naming was more than ceremonial. It was part of a broader effort to legitimize the new state through references to Indianized models of kingship and dharma. King Ramathibodi I began his reign by focusing on internal consolidation. His first major act was to establish a legal code. Drawing from earlier Khmer administrative traditions and local Thai customs, he is credited with formulating the foundational laws that would guide the kingdom's governance. These laws emphasized the divine nature of kingship, the duties of officials, and the rights of common people, all arranged in a hierarchical framework that reinforced the central authority of the monarch. The political structure of early Ayutthaya was modeled on the mandala system, a Southeast Asian political concept in which power radiated outward from a central court to a ring of dependent cities and vassal states. This model emphasized flexible alliances, tribute relationships, and overlapping sovereignties. Ramathibodi I's genius was in adapting this system to the realities of Central Siam, building a centralized capital while acknowledging the autonomy of regional powers when necessary. Religion was another cornerstone of the new kingdom. Ramathibodi I declared Theravada Buddhism the official religion of Ayutthaya. This was not merely a spiritual decision, it was a strategic one. Theravada Buddhism, with its emphasis on moral order and hierarchical relationships, complemented the ideals of centralized monarchy. The king positioned himself as a Dhammaraja, a righteous ruler upholding Buddhist law. This role allowed him to portray his authority as both earthly and sacred, a concept already well established in nearby Sri Lanka and increasingly influential in mainland Southeast Asia. To promote this religious agenda, Ramathibodi I sponsored the construction of temples and monasteries across the growing capital. He invited monks from Sukhothai, Lavo, and even from beyond Siamese borders to help strengthen the kingdom's monastic community. Buddhist counsels and teachings were encouraged, and the Vinaya, the monastic code, became a guide not only for monks but also for civil governance. Beyond religion and law, Ramathibodi I paid close attention to diplomacy and trade. From the beginning, Ayutthaya was conceived as a city open to international exchange. Its strategic location near the Gulf of Siam, combined with its position at the junction of major river routes, made it an ideal hub for maritime and inland trade. Merchants from China, India, the Malay world, and even the Middle East began arriving in Ayutthaya not long after its founding. These traders brought goods, porcelain, spices, textiles, and precious metals, but they also brought information, technology, and new ideas. Ramathibodi I understood the importance of engaging with these external forces. He sent envoys to China, initiating tribute relations with the Ming court. This diplomatic relationship opened the doors to a larger network of trade and political recognition, reinforcing Ayutthaya's position in the region. But while Ayutthaya welcomed foreign contact, it was not passive in regional affairs. From its earliest years, the kingdom showed a willingness to use military force when necessary. Ramathibodi I launched campaigns against neighbouring cities, particularly those that resisted integration or threatened the new order. One of his most significant military achievements was the capture of Lavo, a city that had long been a Khmer stronghold. This victory gave Ayutthaya control over a key region and marked a clear shift in the balance of power in central Siam. Following this, Ramathibodi I turned his attention northward. Sukhothai, although weakened, still held symbolic weight as a center of early Thai identity and Buddhist legitimacy. Rather than launching an immediate invasion, Ramathibodi I pursued a more cautious strategy. He arranged for political marriages and gradually cultivated alliances with the Sukhothai elite. This diplomatic approach allowed Ayutthaya to expand its influence without overstretching its resources. By the end of his reign in the late 1300s, Ramathibodi I had laid the foundation for a durable state. He had centralized authority, promoted a shared religious and legal framework, established diplomatic relations with major powers, and begun a campaign of territorial expansion that would continue under his successors. His death, however, revealed the underlying tensions within the young kingdom. A succession crisis emerged, reflecting the fact that Ayutthaya's political culture, though centralized in theory, still relied on the cooperation of powerful noble families and provincial leaders. After his passing, his son Ramaswan briefly took the throne, only to be forced to abdicate in favor of Boromiraja of Suphanafum, a rival branch of the royal family. After its founding under King Ramathibodi I, Ayutthaya did not remain a fledgling kingdom for long. The fertile plains of central Siam offered both opportunity and challenge. This region, rich in resources and threaded with river systems, was home to numerous independent city-states and former Khmer strongholds, many of which had their own ambitions and traditions of rule. The task that lay before Ayutthaya's early monarchs was not merely survival, it was consolidation. Over the course of several decades, Ayutthaya gradually transformed from a promising riverine kingdom into the political heart of the central Thai world. The initial phase of consolidation began shortly after the death of Ramathibodi I. As covered in the previous section, his passing led to a moment of dynastic instability. His son, Ramaswan, briefly ascended the throne but was soon pressured into abdicating in favor of Boromiraja of Suphanafum. This power shift between two royal lineages, the Ayutthaya and Suphanafum families, was a defining characteristic of early Ayutthayan politics. While this internal competition could have fragmented the new kingdom, it instead set the stage for a more robust and enduring consolidation of power. Boromiraja, now king, brought with him a wealth of military experience. His priority was to strengthen Ayutthaya's position by subduing neighbouring polities that remained outside its direct control. Among his first campaigns was an attack on the city of Phetchaburi in the southwest, followed by efforts to suppress rebellion in the nearby town of Suphanburi. These military ventures served a dual purpose. They expanded Ayutthaya's territorial reach and signaled to both allies and rivals that the kingdom would not tolerate insubordination. Boromiraja's reign was marked by pragmatism. He understood that warfare alone could not unify the region. To complement his military campaigns, he employed strategic marriages and alliances with influential families in the surrounding provinces. By drawing these local elites into the Ayutthayan court, He created a network of loyalty that bound the periphery to the center. This strategy would prove essential in maintaining stability in an age when communications and travel were still limited by geography. After his death, the throne passed once again to Ramaswan, the son of Ramatabodhi I. Returning to power, Ramaswan resumed his father's project of unification with renewed determination. His reign was characterized by both military aggression and administrative reform. One of his key targets was the powerful city of Lavo, located to the northeast of Ayutthaya. Although Lavo had earlier been brought under nominal control, its loyalty remained uncertain. Ramaswan launched a decisive campaign to crush opposition there and successfully integrated the city into Ayutthaya's administrative structure. Another major focus of Ramaswan's efforts was the suppression of threats from the north. Although the Sukhothai kingdom was in decline, its symbolic importance and former dominance meant that it continued to influence regional politics. Ramaswan began laying the groundwork for its eventual integration into Ayutthaya's orbit, though this would be accomplished more fully by later kings. While military campaigns continued, one of the most transformative developments during this period was the gradual adoption of a more organized bureaucracy. The Ayutthayan state began to distinguish itself from the loosely organized mandala networks of earlier times. Kings began to appoint officials not merely based on birthright or local power, but also on their loyalty to the throne. Administrative posts were formalized and court procedures grew more elaborate. This shift marked the beginning of a more centralized system of governance, even if it still had to accommodate the realities of regional autonomy. Throughout this period of consolidation, the capital city of Ayutthaya was growing rapidly. Its strategic location on an island surrounded by 3 rivers made it easily defensible and ideally situated for trade and transportation. The city's population swelled with merchants, monks, artisans, and soldiers drawn by opportunity and royal patronage. Canals were dug to improve internal mobility, and temples rose alongside administrative buildings. The development of Ayutthaya as a capital was both a physical and symbolic representation of the kingdom's rising power. The unification of the Central Plains also had cultural implications. As different regions were absorbed, their customs, dialects, and religious practices began to merge within the Ayutthayan sphere. While Theravada Buddhism remained dominant, local traditions were incorporated into state rituals, creating a rich tapestry of belief and ceremony. The court began to cultivate a unique Siamese identity that drew from Thai, Mon, and Khmer influences, but was also increasingly distinct. An important figure in this stage of consolidation was King Intharaka, who came to power in the early 15th century. A descendant of the Suphanafam line, he continued the work of his predecessors by securing control over rebellious vassals and defending the kingdom from external threats. One of his major accomplishments was defeating a coalition of northern rivals that included remnants of the Sukhothai kingdom and Lan Na forces. These victories solidified Ayutthaya's status as the dominant power in the central basin. King Intharaka's reign also saw the continued formalization of royal rituals and legal traditions. He promoted the construction of important religious structures and oversaw the further development of the capital. Under his rule, Ayutthaya moved from being a strong kingdom among many to becoming the unquestioned leader of the Central Plains. Another key factor in Ayutthaya's consolidation was its control of trade routes. As the kingdom expanded, it gained access to key inland and coastal markets. Ayutthayan rulers capitalized on this by encouraging commerce and establishing a system of state oversight. Ports along the Gulf of Siam were brought under royal control, and a system of tolls and duties was introduced. This not only brought wealth into the kingdom, but also allowed the state to regulate foreign influence and maintain a degree of autonomy in international affairs. By the early 15th century, Ayutthaya had firmly established itself as the dominant power in the central Chao Phraya basin. With the core of its territory consolidated, the kingdom began to look outward. The next phase of its rise involved testing its strength against older regional powers, most notably the remnants of the Khmer Empire to the east and the Lan Na kingdom to the north. These confrontations were not isolated border skirmishes, but were part of a broader struggle for supremacy in mainland Southeast Asia. Through a series of campaigns, Ayutthaya would redefine the region's political geography and position itself as an empire in the making. To the east, the once mighty Khmer Empire was a shadow of its former self. Angkor, once the center of a vast and sophisticated state, had declined significantly by the late 14th and early 15th centuries. Political instability, religious conflict, and external threats had weakened Khmer control over its provinces. Angkor had already been sacked by the powerful Thai kingdom of Lanzang in the previous century, and internal succession disputes further fractured the state. By the time Ayutthaya turned its attention eastward, the Khmer were struggling to maintain control over their heartlands, much less their outer territories. The strategic value of Khmer lands was considerable. Control over areas like the lower Mekong and trade routes to the east would enhance Ayutthaya's access to resources and regional influence. Under King Intharacha and his successors, Ayutthaya began a series of campaigns aimed at subjugating Khmer territory. These expeditions were not always about total conquest. In many cases, the goal was to assert overlordship, exact tribute, and weaken the power of Khmer rulers who could still serve as potential allies to Ayutthaya's rivals. One particularly significant campaign took place during the reign of King Boromiracha II, who ruled in the mid-15th century. Around this time, Ayutthayan forces successfully invaded and briefly occupied Angkor. According to some Thai chronicles, this occupation led to the capture of important Khmer artisans, Brahmins, and administrators, many of whom were relocated to Ayutthaya. These individuals contributed to the architectural and ceremonial development of the Ayutthayan court. Although the occupation of Angkor was temporary, it marked a major symbolic and political moment. Ayutthaya was now challenging the legacy of the Khmer Empire on its own soil. This incursion contributed to the further decline of Angkor, which would soon be abandoned by the Khmer elite in favor of more defensible locations further south, such as Phnom Penh. The weakening of Angkor as a political center created a vacuum in eastern mainland Southeast Asia, one that Ayutthaya would continue to exploit in subsequent decades. While these campaigns solidified Ayutthaya's influence to the east, the kingdom also faced serious challenges in the north. The Lan Na kingdom, centered in Chiang Mai, was a powerful and well-established polity with its own traditions of kingship, urban planning, and Theravada Buddhist patronage. At various points during the 14th and 15th centuries, Lan Na had expanded its territory into parts of northern Laos and modern-day northern Thailand. It represented a serious rival to Ayutthaya's influence in the northern regions. The relationship between Ayutthaya and Lan Na was characterized by periods of uneasy peace, interrupted by episodes of open warfare. One of the earliest and most intense confrontations occurred during the reign of King Tilokaraj of Lan Na, who ruled in the mid to late 15th century. Tilokaraj was an ambitious and capable ruler who sought to expand his influence across northern Siam. His campaigns often brought Lan Na forces into direct conflict with Ayutthaya's northern vassals, such as the cities of Phitsanulok and Kamphaeng Phet. In response, Ayutthayan kings, particularly King Burama Trilokanath, undertook military campaigns to counter Lan Na's influence. Burama Trilokanath, who ruled from the mid-15th century onward, was one of Ayutthaya's most innovative and reform-minded monarchs. He is credited with implementing major administrative reforms that strengthened the kingdom's internal cohesion, but he also had to spend much of his reign dealing with the northern threat. In one of the most significant military episodes of his reign, Burama Trilokanath led an expedition northward to confront Lan Na forces. To better manage the campaign, he temporarily relocated the royal court to Phitsanulok, making it a de facto second capital. This move highlighted both the importance of the northern frontier and the seriousness of the conflict. Despite several years of warfare, neither side was able to achieve a decisive victory, and the war eventually settled into a prolonged stalemate. However, the Ayutthayan military experience during this period had long-term consequences. The need for better organization led to the further formalization of the kingdom's military hierarchy. New ranks and titles were introduced, such as the designation of Chao Phraya for top military and noble leaders. These reforms allowed for greater control over provincial armies and helped to standardize recruitment and logistics across the kingdom. The conflicts with Lan Na also revealed the importance of diplomacy alongside warfare. In later years, Ayutthaya would maintain a delicate balance with its northern neighbors, occasionally allying with Lan Sang or smaller Thai polities to check Lan Na's power. While open warfare decreased over time, the strategic competition for influence in the north remained a central feature of Ayutthaya's foreign policy for decades to come. What emerges from this period is a picture of a kingdom that was increasingly confident in its abilities. Ayutthaya's early rulers had succeeded in consolidating the central plains, and now they were projecting power into distant regions. Through campaigns against both the weakened Khmer state and the strong Lan Na kingdom, Ayutthaya tested the limits of its military and diplomatic reach. By the mid-15th century, Ayutthaya stood at a crossroads. The kingdom had weathered decades of external conflict and internal consolidation, but it still faced pressing challenges. The growing size of the kingdom, the ongoing threat from rival powers like Lan Na, and the complexities of managing distant provinces demanded more than military strength. It required a new vision of governance, one that could bring order, stability, and unity to an expanding realm. That vision would come from one of Ayutthaya's most transformative rulers, King Trailokh, also known as Borama Trailokhanate. King Trailokh came to the throne in the year 1448. His reign would last for 4 decades, making him one of the longest-serving monarchs in Ayutthayan history. During his time on the throne, he not only led military campaigns, but also undertook sweeping reforms that reshaped the very structure of the kingdom. His legacy lies not in battlefield glory alone, but in the administrative foundation he laid, one that would sustain Ayutthaya for generations. From the beginning of his reign, Trailokh recognized that Ayutthaya's previous systems of governance, largely reliant on personal relationships, military loyalty, and loosely held vassalage, were inadequate for a kingdom of growing complexity. To address this, he introduced a new bureaucratic order that formalized the relationship between the king, the nobility, and the provinces. One of the most significant reforms was the establishment of the Sakdina system, a ranking structure that assigned numerical land values to officials and citizens. While this system was based on traditional social hierarchies, Trailokh transformed it into a standardized framework that governed rights, responsibilities, and status throughout the kingdom. Under Sakdina, each individual was assigned a numerical value reflecting their place in the social order. This value determined the amount of land they could control, the taxes they owed, and their eligibility for administrative roles. Although these numbers were not arbitrary, they reflected social roles already embedded in Thai society. Trailokh's innovation was to make them the basis of legal and political organization. By doing so, he curbed the arbitrary power of regional nobles and ensured that service to the crown became the main path to advancement. In addition to Sakdina, Trailokh introduced a clearer separation between civil and military administration. Before his reign, many officials held overlapping responsibilities, leading to confusion and power struggles. Trailokh created distinct ministries and ranks, including positions like the Mahathai, Minister of the Interior, the Kalahom, Minister of Defense, and others who were responsible for treasury, justice, and foreign affairs. These roles became permanent fixtures in Ayutthaya's political structure and laid the groundwork for a functioning central bureaucracy. Another important reform involved succession. To minimize dynastic disputes, Trailokh declared that only the king's designated heir would carry the title Uparaja, or viceroy. This heir was usually appointed from among the king's brothers or sons, depending on merit and loyalty. While this did not eliminate succession crises entirely, it did reduce ambiguity and provided a recognized mechanism for power transfer within the royal family. Trailokh's reforms also extended to religion. As a devout patron of Theravada Buddhism, he continued the tradition of royal support for the monastic community. However, he also sought to bring the Sangha, the Buddhist clergy, more directly under royal authority. He introduced a hierarchy within the monastic community and promoted the role of the Sangharaja, or Supreme Patriarch, as the head of all monks in the kingdom. This allowed the state to oversee religious affairs and ensure that Buddhist teachings aligned with royal ideology. The relationship between kingship and Buddhism was central to Trailok's conception of rule. He saw himself not merely as a political leader, but as a Dhammaraja, a righteous king who governed according to the moral principles of the Buddha. To reinforce this image, he famously ordained as a monk during his reign, spending several months in monastic retreat. This act was not unprecedented, but it was highly symbolic. It demonstrated the king's personal commitment to Buddhist virtue and strengthened his moral authority in the eyes of both monks and laypeople. In parallel with these administrative and religious reforms, Trailok also dealt with continued military pressures. The kingdom of Lan Na remained a persistent rival in the north, and Trailok was forced to devote significant resources to containing its influence. To coordinate defense and administration, he temporarily relocated the royal court to Phitsanulok, a northern city that served as a strategic base of operations. Though Ayutthaya remained the ceremonial capital, this move highlighted the king's willingness to adapt to geopolitical realities. While the wars with Lan Na were largely inconclusive, they demonstrated the growing capacity of Ayutthaya's military and logistical systems. Under Trailok's leadership, the kingdom developed a more professionalized army with clearer chains of command and better coordination between central and provincial forces. This military restructuring was closely tied to the administrative reforms of the period, as it allowed the king to mobilize resources more effectively and maintain control over a geographically diverse realm. One of the more understated aspects of Trailok's reign was his use of law and ritual to unify the kingdom culturally. He presided over the compilation and codification of royal laws, which combined customary practices with newly standardized regulations. These laws not only guided officials, but also served as a visible expression of royal justice. By presenting the monarchy as the ultimate source of legal and moral authority, Trailok helped foster a sense of unity across the kingdom's diverse populations. Ritual also played a key role. The royal court became increasingly elaborate in its ceremonies, drawing on Brahmanical and Buddhist traditions to create a powerful image of the monarch as both worldly ruler and divine protector. Court rituals were used to communicate hierarchy, reinforce loyalty, and celebrate important events. Trailok institutionalized many of these ceremonies, ensuring their continuation long after his reign. By the second half of the 15th century, Ayutthaya had grown into a formidable kingdom with centralized authority, a reformed bureaucracy, and a well-organized military. Much of this transformation had been the work of King Trailok, whose reforms helped to bring internal cohesion and administrative clarity. Yet one significant rival power still lingered in the political landscape: the once celebrated kingdom of Sukhothai. Although greatly diminished from its former golden age, Sukhothai remained symbolically and strategically important. Its final absorption into Ayutthaya would not only mark the end of one era, but the full emergence of Ayutthaya as the unchallenged leader of the Thai-speaking world. Sukhothai, founded in the early 13th century, had long been viewed by later Thai chronicles as a righteous and virtuous kingdom. It had served as a cultural and religious beacon, especially under the reign of King Ramkhamhaeng the Great. However, after his death in the late 13th century, the kingdom began to fragment, and by the 14th century, it had become increasingly vulnerable to external pressures. Though weakened, Sukhothai had managed to maintain some measure of autonomy through diplomacy and by aligning itself with stronger powers when necessary. By the time King Trailok ascended the throne of Ayutthaya in the mid-15th century, Sukhothai had already been brought under loose Ayutthayan suzerainty. In fact, Trailok himself had ruled Sukhothai earlier in his career, appointed there as a royal prince before becoming king of Ayutthaya. This early experience would later inform his policies toward the northern territories. While Sukhothai was technically a vassal, it still retained a separate royal court and a degree of independence in local affairs. It had its own monarch, its own officials, and remained proud of its distinct legacy. The turning point came during the later years of Trailok's reign, when the Ayutthayan administration took deliberate steps to bring Sukhothai more fully into the kingdom's fold. This was not a sudden conquest, but a gradual process of integration. The royal court at Ayutthaya began replacing local Sukhothai elites with administrators loyal to the central government. The dual capital arrangement, with Trailok's temporary residence in Phitsanulok, helped facilitate this integration. Located close to the Sukhothai heartland, Phitsanulok served as both a military outpost and an administrative bridge between the two regions. One of the key strategies used by Ayutthaya was the appointment of princes from the Ayutthayan royal family as rulers or governors of Sukhothai. This helped to legitimize the kingdom's presence and ease local resistance. Over time, the role of the Sukhothai kingship was reduced to that of a regional governorship, and eventually, even the title of king disappeared from local use. Sukhothai became, in essence, a province of Ayutthaya. This process was further cemented by cultural integration. While Ayutthaya had its own court traditions and legal codes, it also adopted many of the artistic, architectural, and religious practices that had flourished in Sukhothai. The style of Buddha images, temple construction, and even literary forms from Sukhothai found their way into Ayutthaya's cultural life. Rather than erasing the Sukhothai legacy, Ayutthaya absorbed and reinterpreted it, presenting itself as both the inheritor and protector of Thai civilization. The symbolism of this final absorption was significant. Sukhothai had long represented a model of moral kingship, where the ruler was seen as a benevolent father figure rather than a distant sovereign. This image contrasted with the more hierarchical and ritualized kingship promoted by Ayutthaya, especially after Trailok's reforms. By integrating Sukhothai, Ayutthaya was not only expanding its territory but also asserting a new political ideology, one in which centralized authority and bureaucratic governance replaced the more informal structures of earlier Thai polities. Yet, the integration was not without its challenges. Local elites in Sukhothai were reluctant to give up their autonomy, and there were instances of unrest and resistance. To manage these tensions, Ayutthaya employed a combination of rewards and punishments. Loyal families were granted land and titles, while rebellious ones were removed from office or relocated. Buddhist monasteries, which held significant moral and political influence in Sukhothai, were brought under closer state supervision, often through royal patronage and temple renovation projects. These actions reinforced the legitimacy of Ayutthayan rule, while also integrating Sukhothai's religious institutions into the broader framework of the kingdom. One of the more lasting legacies of this period was the emergence of a truly unified Thai identity. With Sukhothai fully absorbed, Ayutthaya now governed the majority of the Thai-speaking peoples in the central and northern parts of the region. This unification allowed for the development of standardized laws, shared religious practices, and a common administrative language. While regional dialects and customs persisted, the kingdom's rulers actively promoted a sense of unity centered on loyalty to the crown and adherence to Buddhist principles. The absorption of Sukhothai also had economic consequences. The northern territories brought valuable resources, including rice, forest products, and access to trade routes leading to Lan Na and Lan Xang. These new economic links strengthened Ayutthaya's position as a commercial hub, and the additional manpower and agricultural output helped support the kingdom's growing bureaucracy and military. By the late 15th century, with Sukhothai now firmly under its control, Ayutthaya had reached a new stage in its development. It was no longer just a dominant power in the Chao Phraya Valley. It was now the central political and cultural force across much of what is today Thailand. This transformation allowed the kingdom to project its influence even further afield, whether through diplomacy, trade, or military campaigns. As Ayutthaya expanded its influence across the central and northern regions of Siam, it did not remain isolated. Rather, the kingdom looked outward, cultivating diplomatic and commercial ties that would shape its trajectory for generations. One of the most important relationships to emerge during the early period of Ayutthaya's rise was with the Ming dynasty of China. Through formal tribute missions and trade, Ayutthaya secured both material benefits and international legitimacy. This relationship also reflected broader patterns of Southeast Asian diplomacy, where smaller kingdoms often engaged with larger empires to assert their position and gain access to global networks. The Ming dynasty, established in the late 14th century following the collapse of the Mongol-led Yuan dynasty, rapidly reasserted Chinese dominance in East Asia. Under the leadership of Emperor Hongwu and his successors, the Ming court sought to rebuild and expand its influence through the re-establishment of a traditional tributary system. This system was not merely symbolic. It was a highly structured diplomatic framework that allowed foreign states to enter into relations with China while formally acknowledging the Chinese emperor's supremacy. For Ayutthaya, the benefits of such a relationship were clear. By participating in the tributary system, the kingdom could gain access to highly valued Chinese goods, including silk, ceramics, weapons, and books. More importantly, recognition by the Ming court would enhance Ayutthaya's standing in the region, signaling to rivals and allies alike that it was an accepted player in the international order. Ayutthaya's first recorded tribute mission to the Ming court took place in the year 1371 during the reign of King Ramathabodhi I. This initial contact was brief, but it laid the foundation for a more regular exchange in the following decades. Subsequent missions were sent under later kings, particularly during the reigns of King Ramaswan and King Intharaka. These envoys brought offerings such as local produce, aromatic woods, elephant tusks, and regional curiosities to the Chinese court. In return, the Ming emperors provided lavish gifts, including fine textiles, precious metals, and official seals of investiture. One of the most influential aspects of this relationship was its economic dimension. Although the tributary system was nominally diplomatic, it functioned in practice as a form of regulated trade. Ayutthayan envoys were allowed to purchase Chinese goods at fixed prices and sell Siamese products within designated areas of the imperial capital. This arrangement was particularly advantageous for Ayutthaya, which lacked the manufacturing capacity of China but had access to valuable regional commodities like tin, sappanwood, and forest products. The Ming court, for its part, welcomed the tribute missions as a way to demonstrate the reach of its authority. The voyages of Admiral Zheng He in the early 15th century, which brought Chinese fleets to ports across Southeast Asia, reinforced this image. Although Zheng He's expeditions did not focus specifically on Ayutthaya, they contributed to a broader climate of maritime diplomacy and encouraged smaller kingdoms to engage with China on formal terms. What made Ayutthaya's engagement with the Ming dynasty particularly successful was the kingdom's ability to adapt to Chinese diplomatic expectations while maintaining its own autonomy. The Ayutthayan court accepted the ritual requirements of the tribute system, such as the kowtow ceremony and formal titles of submission, but within Siam, these gestures were interpreted differently. While the Chinese court saw Ayutthaya as a subordinate state, the Ayutthayan kings viewed the relationship pragmatically, as a means of gaining resources, recognition, and trade opportunities. The Chinese also offered something less tangible but equally valuable: validation. When the Ming court granted titles to Ayutthayan kings or issued imperial edicts recognizing their rule, it reinforced their legitimacy both at home and abroad. These acknowledgments were especially useful during times of dynastic transition or internal unrest, when a ruler might seek external confirmation of his authority. The impact of Chinese contact was not limited to the court. In coastal and riverine cities like Ayutthaya itself, a growing community of Chinese merchants and craftsmen began to settle. These immigrants brought with them skills in shipbuilding, ceramics, metalwork, and bookkeeping. Over time, Chinese influences became visible in both material culture and daily life, from roof tiles and lacquerware to culinary techniques and medicinal practices. Trade with China also helped Ayutthaya expand its own regional networks. Goods obtained through Chinese exchange could be re-exported to other parts of Southeast Asia, including the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, and beyond. Ayutthaya thus became an intermediary in the maritime trade system, benefiting not only from its own production but also from its strategic position between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. This increased flow of goods and people required better port infrastructure and regulation. The royal court responded by formalizing commercial policies, including systems for licensing foreign traders and taxing imports and exports. Royal officials were appointed to oversee port activities, and designated areas of the capital were set aside for foreign merchant communities. This period saw the early development of what would later become Ayutthaya's famous multicultural neighborhoods. It is important to note that Ayutthaya's engagement with China was never one of dependency. While the Ming court loomed large in the imagination of Asian rulers, Ayutthaya maintained relations with many other powers simultaneously. The kingdom also sent embassies to South Asia and maintained close ties with regional neighbors like Lan Xang, Lan Na, and the maritime states of the Malay Peninsula. The relationship with China was part of a broader strategy of diplomatic balancing, leveraging connections with multiple partners to enhance autonomy and flexibility. As Ayutthaya strengthened its territorial control and expanded its diplomatic networks, the kingdom began to cultivate a distinctive cultural and political identity, one that would come to define Siam in the eyes of both its people and foreign observers. This transformation was not the result of a single ruler or event, but the outcome of a long and deliberate process within the royal court, religious institutions, and artistic traditions. By the early 16th century, Ayutthaya had emerged not only as a military and economic power, but as a cultural beacon in mainland Southeast Asia. At the heart of this development was the formation of a coherent Siamese identity, rooted in kingship, Buddhism, language, and law. The royal court of Ayutthaya served as both the administrative nerve center of the kingdom and the stage upon which the ideals of Siamese civilization were performed. Its layout, rituals, and personnel reflected the cosmological principles that underpinned the monarchy. The king was seen not merely as a political leader, but as a Dhammaraja, a righteous ruler who upheld the teachings of the Buddha. This ideal was expressed through elaborate ceremonies, architectural symbolism, and the codification of royal duties. Palace life was deeply hierarchical. Every individual at court had a defined rank, and behavior was tightly regulated according to protocol. Officials were organized into specific departments, each with responsibilities ranging from taxation to temple construction. These roles were often hereditary, but merit and loyalty could also lead to advancement. At the top of this structure stood the king, whose authority was reinforced through ritual performance and visual grandeur. Court ceremonies played a crucial role in maintaining the social and cosmic order. Annual festivals, coronation rituals, and diplomatic receptions all followed strict forms rooted in both Indic and local traditions. Brahmins, though few in number, remained important ritual specialists, responsible for invoking Hindu deities during state functions. Their presence underscored the syncretic nature of Ayutthayan court culture, where Theravada Buddhism and Hindu cosmology coexisted within the royal ideology. Language was another key element in the formation of Siamese identity. During this period, the Thai script developed into a formal instrument of statecraft and literature. Court documents, religious texts, and historical chronicles were composed in refined forms of the Thai language, often drawing on Pali and Sanskrit vocabulary. The production of such texts not only preserved the kingdom's history, but also promoted a standardized cultural lexicon that united diverse regions under the authority of Ayutthaya. One of the most significant genres to emerge from the court was the royal chronicle, or Phongsawadan. These chronicles recorded the reigns of kings, important wars, and dynastic events. Though often written with a degree of exaggeration or mythologizing, they served a vital political function, reinforcing the legitimacy of the ruling dynasty and providing a shared narrative of national development. Over time, the chronicles became foundational texts for the Siamese historical imagination. Parallel to this literary flowering was the growth of religious institutions. Monasteries were not only centers of worship, but also schools, libraries, and community hubs. The royal family provided patronage for the construction and renovation of temples, commissioning murals, Buddha images, and scripture halls. These structures were often richly decorated, blending Khmer, Mon, and Sri Lankan influences into a uniquely Ayutthayan aesthetic. The Sangha, or monastic community, played a central role in society. Monks were respected as moral guides, teachers, and mediators. Young boys from noble and commoner families alike often spent time in monasteries as novices, receiving instruction in reading, writing, and religious practice. This widespread monastic education helped disseminate Buddhist values and contributed to a sense of shared culture across the kingdom. One of the most striking aspects of Ayutthaya's cultural development was its visual and material expression. Temple architecture evolved to include tall prangs, tower-like spires, chetas, stupas, and assembly halls designed to accommodate large gatherings of monks and laypeople. These structures reflected both cosmological symbolism and practical concerns, such as the management of space and ritual movement. Buddha images produced during this period showed a distinct stylistic refinement. They were often cast in bronze with elegant proportions and serene expressions. These sculptures served not only as devotional objects, but also as markers of royal and religious patronage. Some were transported to provincial temples to assert the king's presence throughout the realm. Court-sponsored artisans also produced lacquerware, textiles, and ceramics that combined beauty with utility. These goods circulated within the kingdom and were also exported to neighboring regions, further enhancing Ayutthaya's reputation as a center of refinement and craftsmanship. The visual splendor of the capital city itself contributed to the emergence of Siamese identity. Foreign visitors described Ayutthaya as a city of canals, palaces, and golden temples. Though such accounts were often idealized, they suggest that the kingdom succeeded in projecting an image of wealth, order, and divine authority. The rise of a cosmopolitan elite also shaped court culture. As Ayutthaya's international connections grew, the capital became home to communities of foreign merchants, diplomats, and artisans. While these groups were often segregated into designated quarters, their presence introduced new customs, goods, and ideas into the court's orbit. Chinese, Persian, and Indian influences could be seen in clothing, cuisine, and decorative arts. Importantly, the court did not passively absorb these influences. It actively curated them. Foreign elements were adapted and reinterpreted within the framework of Siamese ideals. This selective openness allowed Ayutthaya to maintain cultural sovereignty while benefiting from global exchange. Law and justice also played a defining role in this cultural consolidation. Royal decrees were compiled into legal codes that blended customary practices with Buddhist ethics and royal authority. These laws covered a wide range of topics, including land tenure, inheritance, crime, and taxation. They were enforced by appointed officials and interpreted by judges trained in court protocol. One notable feature of Ayutthayan legal culture was its emphasis on balance and restoration. Punishments were designed not only to deter wrongdoing but to restore social harmony. Compensation to victims and ritual purification were often part of legal settlements, reflecting a view of justice grounded in both social order and religious merit. By the early 16th century, Ayutthaya had firmly established itself as a central power in mainland Southeast Asia. Politically unified, culturally vibrant, and actively engaged in regional diplomacy. But the next phase of the kingdom's development would come from an entirely new direction. For centuries, Ayutthaya had looked east and west across Asia, fostering connections with Chinese dynasties, Indian merchants, and Islamic states. Now, for the first time, it encountered powers from an entirely different continent, Europe. The arrival of the Portuguese in Southeast Asia in the early 16th century marked a major shift in global trade and diplomacy. The Portuguese, driven by maritime ambition, technological innovation, and religious zeal, had rounded the Cape of Good Hope and sailed into the Indian Ocean. Their conquest of Malacca in the year 1511 gave them a foothold in the Malay Peninsula, and from there, they began to explore inland and forge alliances with local kingdoms. Ayutthaya's first known contact with the Portuguese occurred shortly after the fall of Malacca. Following their victory, the Portuguese sought trade agreements with neighboring powers to expand their influence and commercial reach. One of their early envoys arrived in Ayutthaya around the year 1516 during the reign of King Ramathibodi II. This initial diplomatic contact laid the groundwork for one of the most significant cross-cultural relationships in Ayutthayan history. The Portuguese came bearing gifts, exotic goods, and, perhaps most importantly, firearms. While gunpowder had long been known in Asia, the Portuguese brought new types of weapons, matchlock muskets, cannons, and techniques for naval warfare. For Ayutthaya, which had already developed a formidable military structure, these technologies offered a potential advantage over regional rivals, particularly the Burmese and other kingdoms engaged in territorial disputes. In return, the Portuguese were eager to access Siamese goods, such as sappanwood, ivory, and ceramics. More importantly, they sought to secure trading rights and establish a permanent presence in Ayutthaya. King Ramathibodi II, recognizing the benefits of such an alliance, granted the Portuguese permission to build a settlement and engage in trade. This agreement marked the beginning of a long-standing Portuguese presence in the kingdom. One of the most visible signs of this new relationship was the creation of a designated Portuguese quarter in the capital. Located outside the city walls but close enough to allow interaction, this area soon became home to merchants, mercenaries, and missionaries. The Portuguese brought with them not only goods and weapons, but also religion. Catholic missionaries began preaching Christianity among the local population, though their success in converting Thais remained limited. However, the Portuguese did find greater success in other roles, particularly as soldiers. Ayutthayan kings began to employ Portuguese mercenaries as part of their armed forces. These soldiers introduced European-style drill, fortification design, and artillery tactics. In several conflicts against neighboring states, Portuguese-trained units played a decisive role, earning them both prestige and influence within the kingdom. This military cooperation came with mutual benefits. The Portuguese received royal protection, commercial privileges, and freedom to practice their religion. In return, Ayutthaya gained access to European technology and expertise at a time when warfare in the region was becoming increasingly intense. The presence of Portuguese arms would remain a feature of Ayutthayan military capacity for generations. Trade between the two sides flourished. Portuguese ships brought textiles from India, silver from Japan, and wines from the Iberian Peninsula. In exchange, Siamese merchants supplied tropical hardwoods, deerskins, pepper, and other valuable commodities. The port of Ayutthaya became a regular stop in the Portuguese maritime circuit, which stretched from Goa to Macau. Cultural exchange followed commerce and warfare. Portuguese influence began to appear in Siamese dress, culinary practices, and architecture. Certain loanwords from Portuguese found their way into the Thai language, particularly in relation to military equipment and Christian terms. Though relatively small in number, the Portuguese community in Ayutthaya left a lasting imprint on the kingdom's cosmopolitan character. Not all aspects of the relationship were smooth. The Portuguese were often perceived as aggressive and arrogant by local elites. Their strong missionary zeal and refusal to fully adapt to local customs occasionally caused friction. But these tensions were generally outweighed by the strategic and economic advantages the relationship offered. Ayutthaya, for its part, handled this new contact with remarkable pragmatism. The kingdom did not allow itself to be overwhelmed or dominated by Portuguese interests. Instead, it integrated the newcomers into its existing political framework, maintaining control over trade, settlement, and religious activity. In doing so, it demonstrated a pattern that would define its dealings with all subsequent European powers: openness to exchange, but on Siamese terms. The arrival of the Portuguese also forced Ayutthaya to refine its foreign policy. Previously, the kingdom had dealt primarily with Asian states sharing similar diplomatic customs. The Portuguese, however, operated according to very different assumptions. They claimed supremacy in the name of distant monarchs and demanded exclusive trading privileges. Ayutthaya resisted these claims, asserting its sovereignty while carefully managing the terms of engagement. This strategy of selective accommodation allowed the kingdom to benefit from European knowledge without compromising its independence. When other European powers, such as the Dutch, French, and English, later followed the Portuguese, Ayutthaya would apply a similar approach, encouraging competition among them and avoiding dependence on any single foreign actor. By the late 16th century, the Ayutthaya kingdom found itself at a crossroads. The glory of previous centuries, marked by administrative reform, cultural sophistication, and expanding trade, was increasingly overshadowed by external threats. Chief among these was the rising power of the Burmese Toungoo dynasty. After decades of rivalry and intermittent warfare, Ayutthaya's independence came under direct threat. In the face of occupation, instability, and existential danger, one figure emerged who would change the course of Siamese history: King Naresuan the Great. Naresuan's reign, beginning in the year 1590 and continuing until 1565, represents a turning point in Ayutthaya's political and military story. His leadership, characterized by strategic brilliance and personal courage, transformed Ayutthaya from a vassal state into a fiercely independent kingdom. His victories on the battlefield not only liberated Ayutthaya from Burmese dominance, but also laid the foundation for national pride and a heroic narrative that remains central to Thai historical memory. The roots of this struggle began in the mid-16th century when Ayutthaya fell to the Burmese under King Bainong of the Toungoo dynasty. In the year 1564, after a series of intense campaigns, Ayutthaya was captured and reduced to a vassal state. The Burmese installed a pro-Burmese administration and took royal hostages, including Prince Naresuan and his brother, Prince Ekathatsarat, who were sent to Pegu, the Burmese capital, to ensure Siamese obedience. This tactic, common in Southeast Asian politics, was meant to pacify conquered territories by holding their future rulers hostage. However, it had the unintended effect of sharpening Prince Naresuan's political and military awareness. During his years in Pegu, Naresuan was exposed to Burmese court culture, military training, and political maneuvering. He observed both the strengths and weaknesses of the Toungoo system, gaining insights that would later inform his resistance. In the year 1571, Naresuan was released and returned to Ayutthaya, where he was made governor of Phitsanulok. His governorship was not merely ceremonial. Situated near the northern frontier, Phitsanulok was a strategic base in any conflict between Burma and Siam. From here, Naresuan began building his own military power base, cultivating loyalty among provincial commanders and strengthening regional defenses. The critical moment came in the year 1584. With the Burmese Empire beginning to fracture following King Bainong's death, Naresuan declared Ayutthaya's independence. According to Thai chronicles, this declaration was made dramatically during a river crossing in Burmese territory. Realizing that Burmese forces intended to assassinate him, Naresuan turned against his former captors and killed the Burmese general leading the ambush. This act marked the beginning of open rebellion. Naresuan's subsequent military campaigns were bold and relentless. He moved quickly to secure key cities and fortresses, defeating pro-Burmese factions within Siam and confronting external incursions. His ability to mobilize troops, maintain supply lines, and coordinate simultaneous operations across different fronts demonstrated not only tactical acumen, but also the depth of loyalty he had cultivated among both nobles and commoners. One of the most legendary episodes of Naresuan's reign was the famous elephant duel at Nong Sarai, which occurred in the year 1593. In this confrontation, Naresuan faced the Burmese crown prince in single combat atop war elephants. The duel, according to chronicles, ended with Naresuan killing the Burmese prince, symbolizing the decisive break between Siam and Burma. While historians debate the details of the duel, its symbolic significance is undisputed. It came to represent the restoration of Siamese sovereignty and the personal heroism of the king. Naresuan's victories extended beyond symbolic gestures. He launched campaigns into Burmese territory, striking at key towns and testing the limits of Tungu power. At the same time, he worked to consolidate internal unity. He reasserted royal control over provinces that had drifted toward autonomy, restructured the military to better respond to regional threats, and maintained diplomatic relations with other Southeast Asian polities to prevent Ayutthaya's isolation. One of Naresuan's most enduring achievements was the restoration of confidence in Ayutthaya's monarchy. During the years of Burmese suzerainty, the image of the king had been weakened by foreign control and internal division. Naresuan reversed this trend through personal example. He led troops into battle, took physical risks, and refused to delegate the most dangerous decisions to others. This hands-on leadership reinvigorated the royal institution and inspired loyalty across the kingdom. His brother, Prince Ayutthaya, played a supportive role in many of these efforts. While Naresuan focused on military campaigns, Ayutthaya managed affairs in the capital and provided continuity in governance. The two brothers worked in tandem, maintaining the balance between warfare and administration. Religious patronage also played a role in solidifying Naresuan's legitimacy. Despite the wartime context, he sponsored the construction and renovation of temples, supported the Sangha, and reaffirmed his status as a righteous king. These actions helped to present the War of Independence not only as a political and military campaign, but also as a moral and spiritual struggle to defend the Dharma. Yet Naresuan's reign was not without difficulties. The kingdom remained vulnerable to counterattacks, and several regions along the northern and western frontiers remained contested. Supply shortages, internal disputes, and the immense cost of prolonged warfare strained Ayutthaya's resources. Nonetheless, by the time of his death in the early 17th century, Naresuan had succeeded in re-establishing Ayutthaya's independence and transforming its international standing. The Ayutthaya kingdom's hard-won independence under King Naresuan the Great did not mark the end of conflict with Burma. On the contrary, it ushered in a prolonged and often brutal period of warfare that would span more than a century. From the early 17th century into the 18th, Ayutthaya and successive Burmese dynasties engaged in a series of military confrontations that shaped the geopolitics of mainland Southeast Asia. These wars were not only about territorial control, but also about prestige, sovereignty, and survival. They tested the strength of Ayutthaya's military institutions, strained its resources, and influenced the kingdom's political evolution. In the aftermath of Naresuan's victories, Ayutthaya remained vigilant. Although the Tungu dynasty in Burma was weakened following the death of King Bayinnaung and the defeats inflicted by Naresuan, it was not defeated altogether. The Burmese retained a formidable military and territorial ambitions. Similarly, Ayutthaya, now re-energized under independent rule, sought to secure its borders, expand its influence, and prevent a return to foreign domination. The early 17th century saw intermittent skirmishes and raids along the borderlands, particularly in the Tenasserim region and the upper Chao Phraya Valley. These frontier zones, rich in resources and strategically located, became focal points of contention. Both Ayutthaya and Burma struggled to assert control over the same contested spaces. These regions were also populated by diverse ethnic groups, including Mon, Karen, and Shan communities, whose shifting loyalties added complexity to the conflict. King Ayutthaya, who succeeded Naresuan, pursued a policy of defensive consolidation. He aimed to strengthen the internal administration of Ayutthaya while maintaining a vigilant posture toward external threats. Although he did not launch major campaigns into Burma, he reinforced the northern garrisons and invested in the kingdom's fortification system. Under his rule, Ayutthaya maintained a tense peace with Burma, punctuated by minor incursions and diplomatic overtures. This uneasy balance was disrupted as both kingdoms underwent internal changes. In Burma, the Tungu dynasty gradually declined due to succession disputes, economic hardship, and resistance from peripheral regions. By the mid-17th century, the central authority of the Burmese monarchy was significantly weakened. leading to a temporary reduction in cross-border hostilities. Ayutthaya used this period to focus on diplomatic and commercial expansion, particularly toward maritime Southeast Asia and emerging European powers. However, peace was not to last. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, a new Burmese dynasty, the Konbaung, emerged with renewed ambition and military vigor. Under the leadership of King Ayutthaya and his successors, Burma began to reunify its fractured territories and reassert its influence over neighboring states. The rise of the Konbaung dynasty marked a return to expansionist policies and direct confrontation with Ayutthaya. During this time, Ayutthaya too had evolved. It had become a more centralized and cosmopolitan state, but its internal cohesion was increasingly fragile. Powerful noble families wielded growing influence, and regional governors often acted with a degree of autonomy that challenged royal authority. The monarchy, while still respected, faced difficulties in mobilizing resources and maintaining unity across the realm. The renewed Burmese-Siamese conflict in the 18th century was far more devastating than earlier encounters. The Konbaung rulers, driven by a combination of revenge for past defeats and strategic necessity, launched large-scale invasions of Siamese territory. These campaigns were characterized by extensive use of artillery, scorched earth tactics, and sieges of fortified cities. Ayutthaya, for its part, struggled to maintain a consistent defense due to internal divisions and logistical challenges. One of the most intense phases of warfare came under the reign of King Sinbushin of Burma, who launched several invasions into Siam in the mid-18th century. These efforts culminated in the catastrophic campaign that would eventually lead to the fall of Ayutthaya. But even before that final blow, the wars inflicted widespread devastation on the countryside, disrupted trade routes, and weakened the kingdom's administrative capacity. Throughout this period, Ayutthaya continued to rely on its traditional strengths: fortified cities, river-based supply lines, and a resilient population. The kingdom also benefited from alliances with neighboring polities, including the Mon and Lao kingdoms, many of which resisted Burmese domination. However, these alliances were often unstable, and betrayals or shifts in loyalty could undermine military campaigns. The wars also had significant social consequences. Constant military mobilization placed heavy demands on the population. Rice fields were abandoned as villagers were conscripted into the army or fled from advancing forces. Temples and monasteries, long seen as sanctuaries, were targeted or looted during invasions. Cultural artifacts were lost, and religious life was frequently disrupted. Despite the resilience of the Buddhist Sangha, the toll of war on religious institutions was considerable. On the political front, the monarchy struggled to maintain centralized control. The constant threat of invasion forced kings to delegate authority to local leaders and military commanders, some of whom used the opportunity to consolidate their own power. This decentralization, while necessary for short-term defense, weakened the long-term stability of the state. Yet, it would be wrong to view Ayutthaya solely as a victim during this century of conflict. The kingdom fought tenaciously, adapted its military strategies, and managed to repel or contain many Burmese incursions. It fortified key cities, reorganized provincial defenses, and made efforts to modernize aspects of its army, sometimes with the aid of European advisors or foreign mercenaries. It also continued to function as a center of diplomacy and trade, even during periods of intense warfare. The sustained Burmese-Siamese Wars reflect the enduring rivalry between two powerful civilizations with overlapping spheres of influence. Both sought to dominate the same strategic corridors, command the allegiance of border regions, and assert cultural prestige. For Ayutthaya, these conflicts were as much about protecting its identity and autonomy as they were about controlling land. As the 17th century unfolded, Ayutthaya continued to develop into one of the most important political and economic powers in Southeast Asia. While its internal administration evolved and external threats from regional rivals such as Burma persisted, Ayutthaya also became increasingly entangled in a broader network of global commerce. Among the most consequential developments of this period was the arrival and establishment of the Dutch East India Company, or Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, VOC, whose presence would fundamentally reshape Ayutthaya's role in international trade. The Dutch first appeared in Southeast Asia at the dawn of the 17th century. Driven by a desire to break the Portuguese monopoly on Asian commerce, the VOC aggressively established trading posts and fortified settlements throughout the region. They had already positioned themselves in places such as Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, and Malacca, and their agents sought access to valuable trade routes and goods that Ayutthaya had long controlled or influenced. Ayutthaya, for its part, had no desire to turn inward or reject foreign trade. The kingdom had long engaged with Chinese merchants, Indian traders, and the Portuguese. The arrival of the Dutch was not seen as an existential threat, but as another opportunity, one that could be managed, negotiated, and perhaps even used to Ayutthaya's advantage. As in previous cases, the Ayutthayan court followed a pattern of pragmatic diplomacy, allowing foreign powers limited privileges while maintaining sovereignty over trade regulations, settlement policies, and religious activity. The first formal Dutch embassy to Ayutthaya took place in the early years of the 17th century, during the reign of King Songtham. The VOC proposed commercial agreements that would grant them favorable access to Siamese goods in exchange for military support and continued trade of firearms, cloth, and luxury items. The court welcomed the potential benefits of such a relationship, but did not allow itself to be dominated by Dutch demands. Over time, the Dutch were permitted to establish a trading factory, or lodge, in Ayutthaya. This facility served not only as a warehouse and residence for VOC employees, but also as a base for negotiation, information gathering, and logistical coordination. The Dutch factory became one of several foreign compounds in the city, existing alongside those of the Portuguese, Japanese, Chinese, and other communities. Each group operated under strict royal supervision and within designated zones, reflecting Ayutthaya's commitment to managing foreign influence without undermining domestic authority. One of the primary goods the Dutch sought in Siam was deer hides, used in Japan for the production of samurai armor. Ayutthaya had access to abundant supplies of this commodity, particularly from forested regions and through hunting by local communities. The VOC paid handsomely for these hides, and the trade became a source of significant income for the Siamese court. In return, the Dutch supplied firearms, gunpowder, tin, lead, and various luxury items, including textiles and ceramics. The Dutch also became involved in the trade of forest products such as sappan wood, a valuable dye, and rice, which was in high demand throughout the region. They assisted Ayutthaya in exporting goods not only to Java and the Malay world, but also as far as Japan and India. In doing so, the VOC served as a bridge between Ayutthaya and the wider maritime trading system that spanned the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Despite the economic success of this relationship, tensions were never far from the surface. The VOC, unlike previous foreign traders, was not simply a group of merchants. It was a state-sponsored enterprise with its own military forces, strategic goals, and political ambitions. This distinction made its presence more difficult to control. The Dutch expected monopolistic privileges and frequently attempted to pressure the court into excluding rival traders, including the Portuguese and the English. Ayutthaya resisted these demands. While willing to accommodate Dutch interests, the court consistently upheld its policy of open trade and multipolar diplomacy. The king and his ministers skillfully played foreign powers off one another, ensuring that no single group gained complete dominance over the kingdom's commerce. When the Dutch threatened to withdraw from Ayutthaya in protest over policy disputes or competition, the court typically responded with a mixture of concessions and firmness, allowing enough Dutch trade to continue, while refusing to surrender full control. One particularly tense episode occurred when the Dutch tried to enforce a rice export monopoly, demanding exclusive rights to purchase and ship rice from Ayutthaya to other markets. The Siamese government, recognizing the dangers of such a move, rejected the proposal. Rice was not only a commercial product but a strategic resource, critical for feeding the population and supporting military campaigns. Allowing a foreign power to control its distribution would have been politically unacceptable. Despite these moments of friction, the relationship endured. The Dutch continued to operate in Ayutthaya throughout the 17th century, albeit within the limits imposed by the court. Their presence contributed to the kingdom's cosmopolitan character and helped stimulate the local economy. Dutch records from this period provide valuable insight into Ayutthayan society, including descriptions of court ceremonies, religious practices, and daily life. The VOC also contributed to military affairs in more subtle ways. Although Ayutthaya never became a Dutch protectorate, the kingdom occasionally purchased weapons and received technical advice from Dutch engineers. Some accounts suggest that Dutch cannons and firearms played roles in regional conflicts, though Ayutthaya never relied exclusively on European arms. Instead, it continued to blend local military traditions with imported technologies. By the late 17th century, the Dutch presence in Ayutthaya began to decline in relative importance. New powers, particularly the French, entered the scene with different diplomatic styles and ambitions. Internal changes within Ayutthaya also affected its approach to foreign relations. However, the legacy of Dutch involvement remained significant. It had introduced new patterns of trade, new forms of negotiation, and new awareness of global competition. By the height of the 17th century, the city of Ayutthaya had evolved into one of the most diverse and dynamic urban centers in the early modern world. Unlike many contemporary capitals that remained relatively closed to foreigners, Ayutthaya thrived as a hub of international migration, commerce, and cultural exchange. The kingdom's strategic location, combined with its pragmatic diplomacy and open trade policies, made it a magnet for merchants, missionaries, mercenaries, artisans, and adventurers from across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. This cosmopolitanism was not an accident of geography alone. It was a deliberate policy fostered by Ayutthayan rulers who recognized the value of welcoming foreign expertise and economic engagement while maintaining sovereign control. Over time, this policy transformed the city into a truly global capital, where dozens of languages were spoken and multiple faiths were practiced within sight of royal temples and Buddhist monasteries. The layout of the capital reflected this diversity. The city was divided into separate quarters, each designated for specific ethnic or national communities. These enclaves, known as ban or muban, were usually situated along the outer edges of the city or near the riverside ports where most commercial activity took place. Within these zones, residents maintained their own places of worship, schools, dress customs, and languages, while remaining subject to the laws and authority of the Siamese crown. Among the most prominent foreign communities were the Chinese. Chinese merchants had been active in Ayutthaya for centuries, and by the 17th century, they made up one of the largest and most influential non-Siamese populations in the city. They played a central role in trade, particularly in the rice, ceramics, and lacquerware industries. Many Chinese settled permanently, married into local families, and gradually assimilated into the broader cultural fabric of the kingdom. Some even rose to positions of prominence within the court bureaucracy, particularly in roles involving finance, logistics, and foreign trade. Another significant presence was that of the Japanese. In the early decades of the 17th century, political unrest and the closure of Japan to foreign trade under the Tokugawa shogunate led to an outflow of Japanese ronin, masterless samurai, along with traders and Christian converts. Many of these individuals found refuge and opportunity in Ayutthaya. The Japanese quarter, or Ban Yipun, became well known for its martial culture, with many ronin serving as bodyguards, palace guards, or mercenaries under royal command. One of the most famous figures from this community was Yamada Nagamasa, a samurai who rose to the rank of governor and became a close ally of King Songtham. His career illustrates the high degree of social mobility available to foreigners who pledged loyalty to the Siamese crown. Persians also played an important role in Ayutthaya's multicultural environment. Beginning in the late 16th century and continuing through the 17th, a steady stream of Persian merchants, diplomats, and administrators arrived from Safavid Iran and other parts of the Islamic world. These individuals were well versed in trade, court etiquette, and regional diplomacy. Some served as intermediaries between the Siamese court and the Mughal Empire in India, as well as with Islamic polities in Southeast Asia. The Persian community built mosques, introduced Persian-style architecture and cuisine, and even contributed to the royal court's ceremonial life. One notable family, the Sheikh Ahmad lineage, became deeply integrated into Ayutthayan governance and left a lasting influence on later Thai Muslim communities. European communities also left their mark. While the Portuguese and Dutch were primarily engaged in trade and military affairs, they were accompanied by Catholic missionaries, particularly from the Jesuit and Dominican orders. These missionaries established churches, schools, and seminaries in Ayutthaya and sought to convert both the local population and resident foreigners to Christianity. Though conversion efforts among the Siamese were limited in success, the European presence added another layer to the city's religious landscape, which already included Theravada Buddhism, Islam, Confucianism, and traditional Chinese and Indian practices. The English and French also maintained smaller but active communities. The English East India Company established a brief presence in Ayutthaya but struggled to compete with the more established Dutch and Portuguese traders. The French, however, became increasingly influential in the later part of the 17th century under King Narai's reign, particularly in diplomacy and cultural exchange, a development that will be explored in a later section. What made Ayutthaya unique among its regional peers was not only the diversity of its population, but the degree to which these communities were integrated into the kingdom's political and economic structures. Foreign residents were not merely tolerated. They were often granted titles, land, and positions of responsibility. In return, they paid taxes, pledged loyalty to the king, and contributed to the development of the capital through trade, military service, and craftsmanship. This mutual benefit created a relatively stable and prosperous urban environment. Markets bustled with goods from across the world: textiles from India, ceramics from China, spices from the Malay archipelago, and silver from Japan. The rivers around the capital were crowded with merchant vessels, houseboats, and warships, creating an aquatic landscape of constant motion and interaction. The royal court kept a close watch on foreign quarters, but also depended on them to keep the city supplied and connected to global markets. Cultural exchanges flourished in this environment. Siamese elites adopted elements of foreign fashion, cuisine, and architecture, blending them with traditional styles to create a uniquely Ayutthayan aesthetic. Local artisans learned new techniques from Chinese and Persian craftsmen, resulting in hybrid forms of painting, sculpture, and decorative arts. Religious festivals, marriages, and public ceremonies often included multicultural participants, creating shared experiences that transcended ethnic and linguistic boundaries. Of course, this cosmopolitanism was not without challenges. Periodic tensions arose between communities, especially when economic competition or political intrigues spilled into violence. On occasion, the royal court responded with expulsions, restrictions, or the redistribution of privileges. Yet overall, the monarchy's ability to manage diversity without suppressing it remains one of Ayutthaya's most remarkable achievements. The cosmopolitan character of Ayutthaya also impressed foreign visitors. Dutch and French envoys described the city as the Venice of the East and marveled at its wealth, scale, and cultural sophistication. They were particularly struck by the peaceful coexistence of so many religions and ethnic groups under the rule of a Buddhist king, a contrast to the religious wars that still plagued Europe at the time. At the core of Ayutthaya's cultural and political identity stood Theravada Buddhism, a tradition that offered not only spiritual guidance to its people, but also ideological foundations for royal rule. While Ayutthaya was a kingdom defined by diversity, ethnic, linguistic, and religious, its rulers consistently relied on Buddhism as a unifying force. Over the course of more than 4 centuries, successive kings developed and refined a distinctly Siamese form of Buddhist kingship, using religion not simply as a matter of personal devotion, but as a central instrument of statecraft. Theravada Buddhism had long taken root in the region by the time Ayutthaya was founded in the mid-14th century. Influenced by the spread of Sinhalese monastic traditions from Sri Lanka and integrated with earlier Mon and Khmer practices, Buddhism in Siam had already become the dominant religious framework by the time the new kingdom rose to prominence. From the outset, Ayutthayan rulers positioned themselves not only as temporal monarchs, but also as Dhammaraja, righteous kings who upheld the moral order of the Buddhist cosmos. This fusion of religious and political authority served multiple purposes. It gave the king legitimacy in the eyes of his subjects and neighboring states. It provided a moral code by which rulers were judged, helping to balance the sometimes absolute nature of royal power. And it allowed for the creation of a ritual calendar and public life centered on shared values, festivals, and symbols. One of the earliest ways Ayutthaya's kings expressed their commitment to Buddhism was through the construction and patronage of temples. These temples, known as Wat, were not simply places of worship. They served as schools, community centers, libraries, and cultural hubs. From the grand temples in the capital, such as Wat Phra Sanphet, to the smaller provincial monasteries scattered across the kingdom, these institutions connected the monarchy with local communities in tangible and symbolic ways. Temples were often built or renovated to commemorate royal events, including coronations, military victories, or the birth of heirs. Royal donations of land, gold, statues, and scripture were publicly recorded and praised, reinforcing the image of the king as a generous and pious supporter of the Sangha, the monastic community. These acts of merit-making were not only religiously significant, but politically savvy. They linked the crown to the spiritual welfare of the entire kingdom and provided a model for the nobility and commoners to emulate. The Sangha itself played a crucial role in Ayutthayan governance. Monks were not merely religious figures. They were educators, record keepers, and moral authorities. Many young boys, including those from noble families, were temporarily ordained as novices, spending months or years learning to read, write, and study Buddhist texts. This monastic education system helped unify the kingdom by spreading a shared language, script, and set of values across regions and social classes. Senior monks, particularly those holding the title of Sangharaja or Supreme Patriarch, also advised the court and were involved in legitimizing royal authority. Royal ceremonies, from coronations to oaths of office, often included blessings from senior monks and symbolic acts of purification. These rituals emphasized the divine favor and karmic merit of the king, reinforcing his role as protector of both the kingdom and the faith. However, the relationship between the state and the Sangha was not without tension. Ayutthayan rulers recognized that the independence and moral influence of the monastic order could pose a challenge to royal authority if left unchecked. As a result, successive kings implemented various reforms aimed at centralizing control over religious institutions. These included the appointment of royal monks to key positions, the regulation of ordination procedures, and the standardization of monastic discipline. One major reform effort occurred during the reign of King Trailok, who not only strengthened the civil and military bureaucracy, but also reorganized the Sangha into a formal hierarchy. This included delineating responsibilities between urban and forest monks, ensuring that the monastic community remained loyal to the throne and doctrinally unified. Such reforms helped maintain the prestige of Buddhism while ensuring that the Sangha functioned as an arm of the state rather than a rival power. Religious texts and teachings were also shaped by royal influence. Kings sponsored the copying of palm leaf manuscripts, the translation of Pali scriptures into Thai, and the creation of commentaries that emphasized obedience, merit-making, and social harmony. These texts were often distributed to temples across the kingdom, creating a doctrinal coherence that paralleled the administrative unity of the state. The visual and architectural symbolism of temples further reinforced the kingdom's ideological foundations. Temple complexes were often laid out to reflect Buddhist cosmology, with the central stupa or chedi representing Mount Meru, the mythological center of the universe. Murals depicted the life of the Buddha, scenes from the Jataka tales, and images of heaven and hell, serving as both religious instruction and moral education for the public. Festivals and rituals offered opportunities for mass participation in religious life and royal spectacle. Events such as Visakha Buddha Day, celebrating the birth, enlightenment, and passing of the Buddha, brought together monks, royals, and commoners in elaborate processions, candlelit ceremonies, and acts of merit. These public gatherings strengthened social bonds and reminded all participants of their place in the moral and cosmic order under the guidance of a righteous king. While Theravada Buddhism was the official and dominant tradition, the religious life of Ayutthaya was never monolithic. Elements of Hinduism, Brahmanism, and local animist beliefs were woven into the kingdom's spiritual tapestry. Brahmin priests officiated at royal ceremonies, including coronations and astrology-based rituals. Hindu deities such as Vishnu and Shiva were venerated in court circles and even incorporated into royal iconography. Spirit houses and ancestral shrines were common throughout the city and countryside, reflecting the persistence of pre-Buddhist practices. Rather than attempting to eradicate these traditions, Ayutthayan rulers often embraced and co-opted them, integrating diverse spiritual elements into a broader framework of political legitimacy. This inclusive approach allowed the monarchy to appeal to multiple constituencies while projecting an image of divine sanction and cosmic order. Foreign religions were also present, particularly in the capital. Muslim communities, especially those from Persia and South Asia, maintained their mosques and religious leaders with the king's approval. Catholic missionaries, primarily from Portugal and France, operated schools and churches, although they were often subject to restrictions and oversight. These minority communities were generally tolerated so long as they posed no threat to royal authority and complied with the laws of the kingdom. The 17th century was a transformative period for Ayutthaya, marked by increasing foreign contact, the expansion of commerce, and the flourishing of a vibrant royal court. At the heart of this evolution stood King Narai the Great, whose reign, beginning in the year 1656 and continuing for over 3 decades, ushered in an age of unparalleled diplomatic ambition and cultural sophistication. Unlike many rulers who regarded foreigners with caution or suspicion, King Narai embraced international engagement, actively cultivating relationships with regional and global powers, most notably with France, Persia, India, and various European trading companies. King Narai came to power in a period of relative stability. His predecessor had consolidated internal control and maintained Ayutthaya's influence over tributary states in the region. Narai inherited a kingdom that was prosperous, well-administered, and increasingly connected to the broader world through trade networks stretching from Japan to the Mediterranean. Recognizing the opportunities that came with this global positioning, Narai chose to expand Ayutthaya's diplomatic horizons and elevate its international status. From the earliest years of his reign, King Narai demonstrated a flair for diplomacy. He restructured aspects of court protocol to accommodate foreign emissaries and encouraged the establishment of permanent embassies. His aim was not only to attract merchants and technology, but also to strengthen Ayutthaya's strategic position in a world where European powers were competing for influence in Asia. Narai's court soon became a crossroads of cultures, hosting diplomats, missionaries, scientists, and adventurers from across the globe. Among the most notable developments of King Narai's reign was the rise of formal relations with France. While earlier Ayutthayan kings had welcomed Portuguese and Dutch traders, the French engagement under Narai was far more elaborate and ideological. The connection was initiated by French missionaries, particularly from the Paris Foreign Missions Society, who sought to spread Catholicism and foster diplomatic links between Ayutthaya and the court of King Louis XIV of France. At the center of this interaction stood Constantine Falcon, a Greek adventurer who arrived in Ayutthaya as a merchant in the service of the English East India Company. Fluent in multiple languages and deeply knowledgeable in commerce and diplomacy, Phalkon quickly gained the trust of King Narai. Over time, he rose through the ranks to become one of the most influential figures at court, eventually holding the title of Chancellor. Phalkon played a critical role in negotiating treaties, facilitating foreign missions, and shaping Ayutthaya's diplomatic posture. His promotion of French interests, both political and religious, was part of a broader strategy to counterbalance the growing dominance of the Dutch and to modernize the kingdom's military and administrative systems using European expertise. In the late 1670s and early 1680s, King Narai sent a series of embassies to France, while receiving French envoys and Jesuit scientists in return. These embassies, carried out with great pomp and ceremony, were intended to impress both the Siamese and European courts. They included lavish gifts, elaborate rituals, and official declarations of friendship. One such embassy, led by the noble Kosapan, traveled to Versailles, where it attracted significant attention and was received by King Louis XIV in a highly publicized audience. The French responded enthusiastically to these overtures. They saw Ayutthaya as a potential ally and a gateway to further influence in Asia. In addition to diplomatic exchanges, they sent military advisors, constructed forts, and offered to train Siamese troops in European tactics. Jesuit scholars also arrived to conduct scientific experiments and observe astronomical phenomena, introducing new ideas in mathematics, medicine, and engineering to the Siamese court. While these exchanges were largely cordial, they were not without controversy. The growing influence of Phalkon and the increasing presence of French officials alarmed many members of the Siamese nobility and Buddhist clergy. Some feared that the court was becoming too dependent on foreign powers, while others resented the special privileges granted to Catholics and the perceived favoritism shown toward French missionaries. These tensions eventually led to internal dissent. The fear of a possible Christian conversion by the king, whether real or imagined, fueled court intrigue and opposition to Phalkon's policies. At the same time, the traditionalist faction within the court began to organize against what they saw as an erosion of Siamese sovereignty and Buddhist traditions. Despite these growing challenges, King Narai remained committed to his diplomatic vision. He continued to support foreign communities in Ayutthaya, expanded port facilities, and encouraged the translation of European scientific texts into Thai. Under his reign, Ayutthaya experienced a cultural and intellectual flourishing that brought together Eastern and Western traditions in a remarkable synthesis. This period also saw architectural developments influenced by foreign styles. Residences for foreign envoys were constructed with design elements borrowed from Persian, Indian, and European models. One of the most famous was the Lopburi Palace, used by King Narai as an alternative capital. Lopburi, strategically located north of Ayutthaya, became a center for royal experiments in diplomacy, science, and architecture. The palace complex included European-style buildings, observatories, and administrative offices, reflecting the king's desire to blend traditional Siamese aesthetics with new global influences. However, the very openness that defined King Narai's reign would also contribute to its end. As the aging monarch fell seriously ill in the early 1680s, questions of succession and court control came to the forefront. The anti-foreign faction, led by Phra Phetrecha, a high-ranking noble and military commander, moved to seize power. Phetrecha orchestrated a coup, executing Phalkon, expelling the French, and placing himself on the throne after King Narai's death in 1688. This dramatic reversal marked the end of Ayutthaya's most expansive diplomatic chapter. The French, though not permanently banned, were greatly diminished in influence. Missionaries were restricted, fortifications were dismantled, and Ayutthaya adopted a more inward-looking posture for the decades that followed. Yet the achievements of King Narai's reign left a lasting legacy. The final years of King Narai's reign were marked by extraordinary engagement with the global world. His court had opened the doors of Ayutthaya to foreign merchants, diplomats, missionaries, and scholars from across Asia and Europe. But as his health began to fail in the mid-1680s, A powerful undercurrent of opposition emerged within the court, one that viewed the increasing foreign influence, particularly that of the French and their allies, as a threat to Siamese sovereignty, Buddhism, and tradition. This mounting tension reached a breaking point in the year 1688, culminating in what became known as the Siamese Revolution, an event that abruptly ended Ayutthaya's diplomatic openness and shifted the kingdom's trajectory toward internal consolidation and foreign caution. At the heart of this political upheaval was a dramatic power struggle between two factions. On one side stood Constantine Phaulkon, the Greek-born minister who had risen to extraordinary prominence under King Narai. With his deep involvement in foreign diplomacy, particularly with France, and his close association with Catholic missionaries, Phaulkon represented a new kind of royal advisor, one cosmopolitan in outlook and ambitious in scale. On the other side stood Phra Phatracha, a conservative military commander from an established noble family, who was deeply committed to preserving traditional Siamese governance and Buddhist values. Phra Phatracha and his supporters had grown increasingly alarmed by the rapid rise of French influence in Ayutthaya. French officers had begun training the Siamese army and building European-style fortifications. Jesuit priests were operating schools and advising the court on scientific matters. Most controversially, rumors began circulating that King Narai, who had no direct heir, might name a Catholic successor or even convert to Christianity himself. These claims, whether exaggerated or unfounded, fueled fear among the Buddhist clergy and the royal court's conservative elite. When King Narai fell gravely ill in early 1688, the succession crisis escalated rapidly. Phaulkon, anticipating resistance, tried to position Narai's adopted son, Phra Pai, as the king's successor. Phra Pai, though favored by Narai, was widely viewed by traditionalists as a puppet of Phaulkon and his foreign allies. This attempt at succession triggered immediate opposition. Seizing the opportunity, Phra Phatracha mobilized troops loyal to him and launched a swift coup. The royal palace in Lopburi, where the ailing King Narai was staying, became the center of action. Phaulkon was arrested, tortured, and eventually executed. Phra Pai and other royal contenders were also eliminated. Within a matter of weeks, Phra Phatracha had neutralized the pro-foreign faction and established control over the court. King Narai, powerless and bedridden, died shortly afterward, reportedly disillusioned and heartbroken over the purges. Upon ascending the throne, Phra Phatracha moved quickly to reverse the course of the previous decades. His first acts were directed at dismantling French influence. The French military garrisons, particularly those stationed at Mergui and Bangkok, were besieged and expelled after tense standoffs. Though the French resisted, they were eventually forced to surrender and evacuate under negotiated terms. French missionaries were placed under surveillance, and many were sent back to France. Only a small number were allowed to remain under strict conditions. The expulsion of the French marked a clear rejection of the policies pursued by King Narai. While trade continued with other Asian partners and even select European powers, the era of open diplomatic experimentation had ended. Ayutthaya turned inward, focusing on restoring traditional hierarchies and reasserting the primacy of Buddhist institutions. Catholic missions were curtailed, and royal support returned firmly to the Buddhist Sangha. European-style reforms introduced during Narai's reign were abandoned or marginalized, and the influence of foreign advisors was tightly curtailed. Phra Phatracha also undertook efforts to solidify his rule by reshaping the court's political structure. He promoted loyal supporters to high office, suppressed dissent, and redefined the monarchy's role to align more closely with traditional Siamese principles. His reign marked a return to a more insular and conservative model of kingship, one that emphasized spiritual authority, cultural continuity, and independence from foreign powers. Despite the violence and abruptness of the revolution, the new regime maintained political stability. Trade did not collapse, and Ayutthaya remained an important economic center in the region. Merchants from China, Persia, and India continued to do business, and even limited European trade was allowed to resume, especially with the Dutch, who were seen as less politically intrusive than the French. However, the diplomatic boldness of Narai's era was replaced by caution, suspicion, and a desire to prevent future foreign entanglements. The revolution had broader cultural consequences as well. The failure of Catholic missionary efforts and the expulsion of the French reinforced Theravada Buddhism's role as the bedrock of Siamese identity. The court sponsored new temple construction projects, Buddhist education initiatives, and religious festivals as a way of reasserting traditional values. The idea of the righteous Buddhist king, protector of the faith and moral exemplar, was reaffirmed in royal proclamations, art, and public rituals. Internationally, the revolution reshaped Ayutthaya's reputation. European observers, particularly in France, were stunned by the sudden reversal. French writers portrayed Falcon as a tragic hero and Phra Phetracha as a tyrant, though such depictions were often colored by religious and political agendas. Meanwhile, neighboring Asian states viewed the shift as a reassertion of sovereignty in the face of growing European encroachment. Ayutthaya became a symbol of a kingdom that had welcomed the world but retained the capacity to resist and redefine itself on its own terms. As the 18th century progressed, Ayutthaya remained one of the largest and most culturally influential kingdoms in Southeast Asia. Its capital was still a cosmopolitan center of trade and diplomacy. Its temples continued to attract devout pilgrims, and its royal court still commanded respect among neighboring polities. Yet beneath this surface of grandeur and continuity, the kingdom was entering a period of political instability and administrative decline. A weakening monarchy, increasingly autonomous noble families, and growing regional fragmentation all contributed to a slow erosion of central authority that would have profound consequences for Ayutthaya's future. One of the key factors in this decline was the shifting balance of power between the monarchy and the nobility. Throughout much of Ayutthaya's history, kings had maintained control through a combination of military strength, religious legitimacy, and bureaucratic innovation. However, by the early 18th century, this balance had started to tilt. Members of powerful aristocratic families, particularly those who controlled key provinces or held senior court positions, began to act with greater independence from the crown. They used their regional influence, wealth, and private armies to build personal power bases, often bypassing royal directives or manipulating royal appointments to their advantage. The traditional administrative structure that had served Ayutthaya for centuries, the mandala model of radiating power from the center, was becoming increasingly ineffective. While earlier kings had been able to enforce central control through regular inspection tours, merit-based appointments, and the redistribution of power among competing factions, these mechanisms had weakened over time. The capital's reach into the provinces became more symbolic than practical. Many governors acted as de facto rulers, collecting taxes, managing local militias, and engaging in trade with minimal interference from the central government. At the same time, succession disputes and internal court rivalries further undermined royal stability. The process of selecting a new monarch in Ayutthaya was not strictly hereditary, and kings were often chosen through negotiation among senior nobles, princes, and influential court factions. This system, while flexible, also made the throne vulnerable to manipulation, intrigue, and even violence. Several kings in the 18th century ascended the throne amid controversy, with rival claimants and palace conspiracies casting long shadows over their legitimacy. One notable example of this instability was the reign of King Baramakot, who ruled during the mid-18th century. Though he initially brought a measure of stability and religious reform, his later years were marked by increasing isolation and an unwillingness to address growing tensions among his courtiers. His decision to pass over his more capable sons in favor of a less experienced heir created resentment within the royal family and among the nobility, setting the stage for further conflict after his death. The weakening of central authority also had military consequences. Ayutthaya's once formidable army had relied on the ability of the monarchy to mobilize manpower from across the kingdom, including provincial levies, noble retainers, and foreign mercenaries. As the center lost control over the provinces, its ability to raise and coordinate large-scale forces diminished. Local lords often prioritized their own defense or economic interests over contributing to national security. In times of external threat, this fragmentation would prove disastrous. Economic shifts further complicated the situation. While Ayutthaya remained a major hub in maritime trade, global commercial patterns were changing. The decline of some traditional trading partners, along with the rise of new colonial powers like the British and the expansion of Dutch dominance in maritime Asia, altered the flow of goods and influence. Ayutthaya's cautious foreign policy following the revolution of the late 17th century meant that it did not always adapt swiftly to these changes. Although trade continued, the kingdom's relative economic power began to wane. Internally, patterns of wealth distribution also contributed to growing inequality. The rise of tax farming and the increasing burden of corvée labor, obligatory service owed to the state, placed pressure on common people, particularly in rural areas. Tax farmers, often drawn from the wealthy elite or foreign communities, extracted revenue with little oversight, leading to exploitation and social resentment. Meanwhile, many peasants fled their obligations by seeking refuge in temple communities, migrating to less controlled regions, or joining the private militias of provincial lords. Religious life, once a stabilizing force in Ayutthaya's political culture, also began to show signs of strain. The Sangha remained central to daily life and state ritual, but tensions emerged over monastic discipline, doctrinal disputes, and the increasing entanglement of temple wealth with elite interests. Though kings continued to patronize Buddhist institutions and sponsor temple construction, this often served as a display of legitimacy rather than a reflection of deep reform or spiritual revival. Despite these challenges, the kingdom continued to function and many ordinary people carried on with their lives. Local markets thrived, rice cultivation expanded, and cultural traditions remained strong. But the cracks in the kingdom's foundations were becoming more visible. The monarchy was no longer the unifying force it had once been, and the mechanisms for managing diversity and dissent were no longer as effective. What had once been a flexible and adaptive political system was now showing signs of rigidity and disconnection. Another subtle but significant factor in Ayutthaya's declining cohesion was the erosion of collective memory and administrative continuity. The loss or neglect of royal chronicles, legal texts, and state archives weakened the institutional memory of the kingdom. Without a strong written tradition of governance and precedent, each new crisis had to be resolved anew, often through improvisation or coercion rather than reference to established norms. Foreign observers at the time noted both the brilliance and the brittleness of the Ayutthayan state. On the surface, the kingdom still appeared prosperous and orderly. Its capital remained impressive, its ceremonies grand, and its trade routes active. But these same observers also detected a growing disconnect between the court and the countryside, between royal ritual and practical governance. The kingdom's response to external threats would soon test whether its institutions could endure the pressures of a rapidly changing world. By the final decades of the 18th century, Ayutthaya, once a kingdom known for its administrative sophistication, military strength, and economic dynamism, was increasingly weakened not only by external threats, but also by problems festering within. While court ceremonies and temple-building projects continued, beneath this display of grandeur was a crumbling foundation. Corruption among officials, inefficient tax collection systems, and widespread economic hardship contributed to growing dissatisfaction across all levels of society. These internal challenges deepened Ayutthaya's vulnerability, leaving it increasingly unable to respond to the mounting pressure from regional rivals, especially the resurgent Burmese Konbaung dynasty. The most visible symptom of Ayutthaya's decline in governance was the deterioration of its administrative system. In earlier centuries, royal authority had been supported by a well-structured network of appointed officials and a functioning system of merit-based promotions. Over time, however, many key posts were acquired not through ability or royal confidence, but through wealth, family connections, and influence. Senior court positions, including those responsible for tax collection, military recruitment, and provincial governance were often sold to the highest bidder or monopolized by powerful noble families. This led to the widespread practice of tax farming, in which the right to collect taxes was granted to private individuals in exchange for a fixed fee paid to the crown. These tax farmers, drawn from both Siamese elites and wealthy members of the Chinese and Persian merchant communities, were then free to extract as much revenue as they could from the local population, often using coercive or exploitative methods. Since their profits depended on the excess collected beyond what was owed to the state, there was little incentive to moderate their demands or ensure fair treatment. The consequences of this system were severe. Rural communities faced heavy and inconsistent tax burdens, with little recourse to appeal or justice. Peasants, artisans, and small traders often found themselves forced into debt or fleeing their villages to avoid financial ruin. Many sought refuge in monastic life, where they could escape taxation and corvée labor, while others migrated to the frontier regions or offered their services to rival lords. As a result, the central government not only lost valuable revenue, but also struggled to maintain control over a mobile and increasingly disaffected population. The inefficiencies in tax collection were compounded by a weakening of royal oversight. In earlier periods, the crown had maintained close surveillance over provincial officials through regular inspections, audits, and loyalty tests. By the 18th century, these practices had become irregular or ceremonial. In many cases, officials in outlying provinces acted with near-total autonomy, collecting revenue and dispensing justice according to their own interests. Some even maintained private militias and forged alliances with foreign traders, further eroding the power of the capital. Economic strain extended beyond the peasantry. Even within the cities, artisans and merchants faced growing challenges. Trade routes had begun to shift in response to the increasing influence of European colonial powers, particularly the British and Dutch, who favored coastal ports they directly controlled. While Ayutthaya remained an important inland center, it no longer held the same strategic position in the broader maritime economy. Goods that once flowed freely into the kingdom, textiles, firearms, precious metals, were now more expensive and less abundant. Export markets for Siamese rice, teak, and forest products were likewise disrupted, reducing income for both the court and private merchants. The weakening of royal control also meant a decline in state-sponsored infrastructure. Canals and roads were left unmaintained, making it harder to transport goods and supplies across the kingdom. The once efficient communication system between the capital and the provinces became sluggish and unreliable. This logistical breakdown hindered not only commerce but also the ability to mobilize troops or respond to natural disasters such as floods, droughts, or famines. Compounding these economic issues was an increasing reliance on the royal treasury to fund lavish court rituals and construction projects that had little strategic value. Kings and nobles continued to sponsor temple renovations, pagoda gilding, and large-scale festivals in order to display their merit and reinforce their legitimacy. While these acts of patronage had religious and symbolic importance, they diverted precious resources from military readiness, economic recovery, and social welfare. In a time of growing insecurity, such expenditures reflected a dangerous detachment from the practical needs of governance. The judicial system, too, suffered from this climate of corruption and neglect. Bribery and favoritism were commonplace, and access to justice often depended on a litigant's social rank or wealth rather than the merits of a case. Local disputes over land, water rights, and debt could escalate into violence when the courts failed to provide fair rulings. Many people chose to bypass the legal system altogether, turning instead to monastic arbitration or community-based mediation. While these alternatives provided temporary relief, they further undermined the authority of the state and its institutions. Religion, long a source of social cohesion, could not fully compensate for these growing divisions. Although the Sangha retained its moral authority, some temples became entangled in elite politics or tax farming arrangements, damaging their credibility in the eyes of ordinary people. Additionally, The influx of monks seeking sanctuary from taxation created tensions within the monastic community as overcrowded temples struggled to maintain discipline and spiritual focus. In this context, Buddhism remained central to the kingdom's identity, but was less able to function as a unifying force across class and regional divides. The elite's growing detachment from the hardships of the broader population further eroded the social contract. While court officials and noble families continued to enjoy lives of privilege and ceremony, the majority of the population faced increasing insecurity. The gap between rich and poor widened, and resentment simmered beneath the surface. Popular songs, poems, and folk tales from this period began to reflect a tone of disillusionment and critique, signaling a broader awareness that the ideals of righteous kingship and social harmony were no longer being fulfilled. In addition to the strain of internal mismanagement, Ayutthaya's position in the regional balance of power had become increasingly precarious. The Konbaung dynasty in Burma was rising with remarkable speed and military capability, yet the Siamese court appeared slow to respond to this threat. Despite reports of Burmese consolidation and expansion, little was done to strengthen frontier defenses or reform the kingdom's military. Recruitment systems were outdated, weapons stockpiles were poorly maintained, and troop morale was low. Without urgent and coordinated action, Ayutthaya's ability to defend itself was deteriorating at the very moment its greatest external challenge was drawing near. While Ayutthaya's internal structures were weakening, a dramatic transformation was taking place to its west. In Burma, a new force was rising, a force that would soon alter the course of Southeast Asian history. The Konbaung dynasty, forged through military conquest and political consolidation, emerged as a dominant power in the mid-18th century. Its rise was swift, aggressive, and strategic, and it would bring Ayutthaya, already strained by corruption and fragmentation, into direct confrontation with one of its most formidable adversaries. The origins of the Konbaung dynasty can be traced to central Burma, where the collapse of the Tungu dynasty had left a vacuum of authority. For decades, Burma had suffered from internal division, weak kingship, and regional disintegration. The once great Tungu Empire, which had challenged Ayutthaya in the 16th century, had slowly unraveled. Its inability to maintain centralized control and fend off external threats created an opening for ambitious regional leaders to assert power. Into this environment stepped Alang Paya, a village headman from the small town of Shwebo in Upper Burma. Through a combination of charisma, military skill, and populist appeal, he rallied support from local militias and began a campaign to expel rival factions and foreign influence. In the early 1750s, Alang Paya launched a series of campaigns that successfully pushed back the Mon forces of Lower Burma, who had taken advantage of the Tungu collapse to establish their own control. Alang Paya's initial military successes quickly turned into a larger unification movement. With determination and tactical brilliance, he forged alliances, subdued rivals, and re-established control over much of the Burmese heartland. By the mid-1750s, he had crowned himself king and laid the foundation for the Konbaung dynasty. His rule marked a return to centralized authority and a revival of Burmese political and military ambition. One of Alang Paya's early priorities was the suppression of Mon rebellion. The Mon people, with their capital at Hanthawadi, had long been a powerful presence in Lower Burma and had benefited from the disarray of the previous decades. Their kingdom had also received tacit support from European traders, particularly the French, who saw the Mon state as a potential ally in their wider commercial and colonial objectives. Alang Paya, however, was determined to bring the entire region under his control. In a series of decisive campaigns, Alang Paya sacked Mon cities, destroyed their military infrastructure, and forcibly integrated their territory into the Konbaung state. Many Mon leaders were executed or exiled, and a significant portion of the Mon population was forcibly relocated to Upper Burma. These campaigns, though brutal, consolidated Alang Paya's authority and eliminated a long-standing rival. They also demonstrated the new dynasty's capacity for organized and effective military action. With Lower Burma secured, Ayutthaya turned his attention to foreign threats. The expansion of European influence, particularly through the French and the British, was seen as a potential challenge to Burmese sovereignty. Although he allowed limited trade, Ayutthaya took a firm stance against attempts at political meddling. When French officers attempted to build fortifications or influence local leadership, he responded with swift military action, expelling them and reaffirming Burmese independence. These early victories gave the Konbaung dynasty a sense of momentum and confidence. Ayutthaya's success in unifying Burma and resisting foreign interference was hailed as a national revival. His army, organized into disciplined regiments, equipped with both traditional weapons and modern firearms, became one of the most formidable military forces in the region. With the domestic front largely secured, the next step for the dynasty was expansion, and Ayutthaya stood directly in the path of that ambition. Although Ayutthaya and Burma had a long history of conflict, including the dramatic confrontations during the reigns of King Naresuan and King Bayanaung, the early years of the Konbaung dynasty brought a renewed and more aggressive approach. The Burmese saw Ayutthaya as both a strategic target and a potential threat. Control over Ayutthaya would not only eliminate a rival power, but also provide access to critical trade routes, resources, and tributary states in the Malay Peninsula and beyond. At the same time, Ayutthaya appeared increasingly vulnerable. Reports from Burmese agents and merchants suggested that the Siamese kingdom was suffering from internal discord, weakened leadership, and declining military preparedness. The Burmese leadership believed that a swift and well-coordinated strike could achieve what earlier generations had failed to do: bring Ayutthaya completely under Burmese control. After Ayutthaya's death in the late 1750s, the expansionist mission was continued by his sons, particularly King Shinbushin, who ascended the throne in the early 1760s. Shinbushin inherited not only a powerful military machine, but also a clear strategic goal: the conquest of Ayutthaya. Under his leadership, the Burmese military prepared for a series of invasions designed to overwhelm the Siamese kingdom, destabilize its political leadership, and incorporate its territory into the Konbaung Empire. The military campaigns that followed were carefully planned and executed. Burmese forces, well-supplied and battle-tested, advanced across multiple fronts, attacking key border towns and isolating Ayutthaya from potential reinforcements. The Burmese strategy emphasized speed, discipline, and the use of heavy artillery to breach fortified cities. They employed scorched earth tactics in the countryside to cut off supply lines and demoralize local populations. The Burmese also sought to exploit divisions within the Siamese leadership. With Ayutthaya's royal court weakened by infighting and corruption, there was little coordinated resistance. Provincial governors, some of whom had acted with relative independence for years, were reluctant or slow to mobilize in defense of the capital. The result was a fragmented and largely ineffective military response to the Burmese invasion. By the late 1760s, the stage was set for a final confrontation between the two powers. The Burmese armies had already captured significant portions of Siamese territory and were closing in on the capital. Their siege tactics had improved dramatically since earlier wars, and their use of modern artillery made even the walls of Ayutthaya vulnerable. The defenders, outnumbered and poorly coordinated, struggled to mount an effective resistance. The final chapter in the history of Ayutthaya as an independent kingdom was written with fire and iron. In the 1760s, the Konbaung dynasty of Burma, under King Shinbushin, launched a series of full-scale invasions that would culminate in one of the most destructive episodes in Southeast Asian history, the fall of Ayutthaya in the year 1767. These invasions were not mere border conflicts. They were part of a determined and strategic campaign to eliminate a rival power and establish Burmese supremacy over the central plain of Siam. The first major assault came in the year 1760, just a few years after the Burmese had reasserted dominance over their internal rivals and consolidated their hold on the territories of the former Tungu dynasty. King Shinbushin, having secured victories against the Mon and made significant gains against China in the north, turned his full attention toward Ayutthaya. He believed the time was right to strike. Ayutthaya was internally divided, politically fragile, and militarily unprepared for a sustained war. The initial campaign of 1760 demonstrated the overwhelming strength of the new Burmese military. Multiple armies, numbering in the tens of thousands, advanced along carefully coordinated routes through the northern and western frontiers of Siam. They captured key towns such as Phitsanulok and Sukhothai, securing vital supply lines and isolating Ayutthaya from its northern provinces. The Siamese response was fragmented and reactive. Some provincial lords offered resistance, but the central government, led by King Ekathat, lacked the strategic coordination, discipline, and resources to mount a coherent defense. King Ekathat had inherited a deeply troubled kingdom. His rule was marked by court intrigue, administrative confusion, and public dissatisfaction. Unlike earlier monarchs who had earned popular support through acts of military bravery or religious patronage, King Ekathat was viewed by many as weak and indecisive. His ascension had been contested, and his ability to unify the court during a time of crisis was limited. As the Burmese closed in, he struggled to rally his officials, issue commands, or inspire confidence among his troops. Although the Burmese were forced to withdraw from their first campaign due to logistical difficulties and threats from other fronts, particularly renewed pressure from China, this respite for Ayutthaya was temporary. Shinbushin had not abandoned his ambition. He used the following years to regroup, reinforce, and plan a final and decisive campaign that would leave nothing to chance. In the year 1765, the Burmese launched their second and most devastating invasion of Ayutthaya. This time, their objectives were clear: total conquest and the destruction of the Siamese capital. The campaign was characterized by meticulous planning, including the use of experienced generals, mobile artillery units, and scorched earth tactics. Burmese armies entered Siam from multiple directions, overwhelming frontier garrisons and cutting off supply routes to the capital. Ayutthaya, once the heart of a vast and resilient kingdom, was now largely alone. Its vassals were either under siege, defeated, or unwilling to commit forces to a cause that seemed increasingly hopeless. Attempts to secure foreign assistance came too late or failed entirely. The Dutch, now focused on maritime trade, had no interest in intervening. The Chinese were embroiled in their own conflicts, and no significant help arrived from the Malay Peninsula or beyond. The Burmese siege of Ayutthaya began in earnest in the year 1766 and extended into the following year. The city, surrounded by rivers and protected by centuries-old walls, had once seemed nearly impregnable, but its defenses had not been adequately maintained, and its army lacked both manpower and morale. The Burmese used heavy artillery to batter the walls, while launching repeated assaults on weak points in the fortifications. Meanwhile, they employed scorched earth strategies to starve the defenders, destroying rice fields, blocking food shipments, and burning outlying villages. Inside the city, conditions quickly deteriorated. Supplies ran low, disease spread, panic grew. The once thriving capital of Ayutthaya, home to temples, libraries, and bustling markets, was reduced to desperation. Officials turned on one another, and coordination between the monarchy and the military collapsed. King Ekathat, rather than taking command, withdrew into isolation, offering prayers but little leadership. The final assault came in April of the year 1767. After months of siege, the Burmese breached the city's outer walls and poured into the capital. What followed was a scene of devastation unlike any Ayutthaya had ever experienced. Temples were looted, palaces were burned, monasteries and libraries were set alight, destroying countless manuscripts, religious texts, and records of Ayutthaya's long history. Entire districts were razed. The population, weakened by starvation and siege, suffered terrible losses. Many were killed, enslaved, or carried off to Burma as war captives, including artisans, craftsmen, and scholars. King Ekathat, abandoned by many of his retainers, reportedly fled the burning capital. According to some accounts, he died of starvation while hiding in a nearby monastery. Others suggest he was captured or executed. Regardless of the exact circumstances, his death marked the end of Ayutthaya's ruling dynasty and the effective collapse of centralized Siamese authority. The Burmese, having achieved their military objective, did not attempt to administer the territory directly. After looting and destroying the city, they withdrew, leaving behind a smoldering ruin. Their objective had been to eliminate Ayutthaya as a threat, not to occupy it permanently. In this, they succeeded entirely. The city that had stood for more than 4 centuries, once a center of culture, diplomacy, and power, was no more. The fall of Ayutthaya in 1767 was a cataclysmic event for the Siamese world. It marked not only the destruction of a city, but the end of an era. The royal court, its records, its traditions, and much of its cultural heritage were lost in the flames. The regional power structure of Southeast Asia was reshaped, with Burma ascendant and the remnants of Siamese society forced to regroup in fragmented and vulnerable conditions. When the Burmese forces breached the walls of Ayutthaya in the month of April in the year 1767, they did more than win a war. They extinguished one of the most enduring and influential kingdoms in Southeast Asian history. The fall of Ayutthaya was not simply a military defeat. It was a collapse of an entire political, cultural, and religious order that had shaped the region for over 4 centuries. What followed was a period of chaos, mourning, and loss as the once proud capital was reduced to ashes and the Siamese world was thrown into fragmentation. As the invading forces poured into the capital, the scale of destruction was catastrophic. The Burmese, operating under clear orders to ensure Ayutthaya would never again rise as a rival, launched a comprehensive campaign of looting, arson, and devastation. Temples that had once gleamed with golden spires were stripped of their treasures and set aflame. Royal palaces, libraries, administrative buildings, and monuments were torn down, burned, or left in ruin. Entire neighborhoods vanished in fire and smoke, and centuries of accumulated wealth and cultural memory were lost in a matter of days. The destruction was not indiscriminate. It was systematic and purposeful. Burmese forces targeted both symbolic and strategic sites, destroying records, religious relics, and repositories of state power. Thousands of people were killed during the invasion and its aftermath. Many others were captured and deported to Burma, including monks, craftsmen, dancers, and court officials. These captives were often resettled in Burmese cities, where their skills contributed to the enrichment of the Konbaung kingdom. While they survived, their removal further hollowed out what remained of Ayutthaya's society. The psychological impact of the city's fall was equally severe. Ayutthaya had been more than a political capital. It was the spiritual heart of the kingdom, a place where monarchs were crowned, where sacred relics were housed, and where generations had lived under the unifying idea of a righteous and protected realm. Its destruction shook the foundations of Siamese identity. Survivors fled in every direction, north toward Phitsanulok, east to Chonburi and Chantaburi, and south to the riverine settlements along the Gulf of Siam. Communities that had long been unified under central rule now found themselves adrift, leaderless, and vulnerable. The royal family itself was shattered. King Ekathat, who had failed to mount a meaningful defense of the capital, was reportedly killed during the Burmese onslaught or died in hiding shortly thereafter. Other members of the dynasty were either executed or disappeared in the chaos. With the monarchy decapitated, there was no clear successor, no functioning bureaucracy, and no organized military. For the first time in centuries, the political center of Siamese life ceased to exist. Religion, which had long been the moral anchor of the kingdom, also suffered immensely. Monks who had preserved Buddhist teachings, conducted rituals, and educated generations of Siamese were killed, displaced, or enslaved. Temples across the city were defiled or left in ruins. The destruction of sacred texts, written on fragile palm leaf manuscripts, was particularly devastating. Many of these texts, copied and preserved over centuries, were lost forever. With them went knowledge of legal codes, cosmological systems, and royal genealogies. The Sangha, so central to Ayutthaya's cohesion, faced a moment of crisis it had not known in living memory. The collapse of the capital also signaled the end of Ayutthaya's international role. The embassies, trade delegations, and diplomatic missions that had once flowed through its gates came to an abrupt halt. Foreign merchants, if they had not already fled during the siege, were caught in the violence or left in the uncertain vacuum that followed. For European powers, the destruction was a shock. The Dutch, who had maintained commercial outposts near the city, were stunned by the completeness of the fall. Jesuit missionaries and French adventurers who had once dreamed of making Ayutthaya a center of Christian and Western influence now found themselves fugitives in a land without government. Yet even amid the ruins, a powerful instinct for survival endured. Small communities began to rebuild. Local leaders emerged to protect their people, restore order, and defend against bandits or lingering Burmese patrols. Monks who had fled the capital worked to re-establish monastic routines in villages and forest temples. In scattered provinces, governors who had managed to avoid the worst of the devastation began asserting authority, collecting taxes, and forming militias. The fabric of society had been torn, but not entirely destroyed. The memory of Ayutthaya itself quickly took on mythic proportions. Among survivors there was a deep sense of loss, but also of pride. Stories of the city's former glory, its temples, its festivals, and its righteous kings began to circulate orally. These tales, often told in poetry or song, became a way for displaced communities to hold on to their identity and transmit it to the next generation. The kingdom may have fallen, but the idea of Ayutthaya, the spiritual and cultural center of the Thai world, lived on in memory. The destruction also created a political vacuum that demanded resolution. The Burmese, despite their overwhelming military victory, did not attempt to administer Ayutthaya as a colony. Their goal had been punitive and strategic, destroying a rival rather than ruling it. Once this objective was achieved, they withdrew, leaving the remnants of Siamese society to fend for themselves. This absence of occupation created space for new leadership to emerge from within. Among the figures who began to rise in this period of crisis was a military commander of Chinese Thai descent stationed in the eastern coastal town of Chanthaburi. His name was Thaksin. With a small but disciplined force, he launched a campaign to expel Burmese remnants and restore order to the ravaged land. His rise would signal the beginning of the Thonburi period, during which a new capital would be established and a new vision for Siam would begin to take shape. The collapse of Ayutthaya in the year 1767 was one of the most catastrophic events in Southeast Asian history. But from the ashes of the ruined capital, a remarkable effort at revival began. It was not a simple return to the past, nor a continuation of the old order, but rather a process of creative rebuilding. In the midst of destruction, a new leader rose, General Thaksin, who would reunify the fractured Siamese territories, resist continued Burmese pressure, and lay the foundation for the modern Thai nation. This final chapter in the story of Ayutthaya is not one of decline, but of resilience, reform, and the will to survive. Thaksin was born in the early 18th century, possibly around the year 1734, in the cosmopolitan city of Ayutthaya itself. Of mixed Chinese and Thai ancestry, he was not part of the highest nobility, but rose through the military ranks by demonstrating both courage and competence. His birth name was Sin, but he later received the honorary name Phraya Tak after serving as governor of Tak province. His rise reflected the fluid social dynamics of late Ayutthaya, where ability could sometimes outweigh birth. During the final Burmese invasion, Thaksin had been stationed in the eastern town of Chanthaburi, a coastal settlement far from the front lines. When news of Ayutthaya's destruction reached him, he did not descend into despair. Instead, he quickly moved to consolidate local support, gather supplies, and rebuild a military force. Chanthaburi was well positioned for such a task. Its strategic location, access to maritime trade routes, and distance from Burmese-controlled regions gave Thaksin the space he needed to organize. With a modest but disciplined army, composed of loyal soldiers, local volunteers, and refugees, Thaksin launched a campaign of resistance. His aim was not just to push out Burmese forces, but to restore order across the Siamese heartland. His first victories came quickly. Moving westward, he defeated scattered bands of Burmese troops and reclaimed key territories. Towns that had been leaderless or under threat pledged allegiance to him. In less than a year, he reached the area of Thonburi, directly across the river from present-day Bangkok, and established it as his new capital. Thonburi offered several advantages. Located along the Chao Phraya River, it allowed for easy movement of troops and goods. It was smaller and more manageable than Ayutthaya had been, which was important for a state still recovering from trauma. And critically, it was defensible, surrounded by natural barriers and easier to fortify. From this new seat of power, Thaksin began issuing royal decrees, reorganizing administration, and laying the groundwork for a revived Siamese polity. Thaksin's coronation as king in the year 1768 marked the symbolic beginning of the Thonburi kingdom. Unlike the grand rituals of Ayutthaya, his assumption of power was practical and urgent. There was no time for elaborate ceremony. The kingdom needed leadership, and Thaksin provided it with remarkable energy. His rule would last for over a decade, during which he focused on reunifying the kingdom, restoring the Buddhist Sangha, and defending Siamese sovereignty from further Burmese aggression. One of his first priorities was military consolidation. Thaksin understood that a united Siam required more than symbolic authority. It required actual control of territory. He launched a series of campaigns to subdue regional warlords, reintegrate provinces that had drifted into autonomy, and expel any remaining foreign forces. His campaigns extended as far north as Phitsanulok and Chiang Mai, and south into the Malay Peninsula. In each region, he used a combination of diplomacy, military pressure, and reward to secure loyalty. Thaksin was also deeply concerned with religious and cultural restoration. He saw the Buddhist Sangha as essential to the moral and spiritual health of the nation. After the destruction of Ayutthaya, the monastic community was in disarray. Many temples had been destroyed, sacred texts lost, and monks scattered. Thaksin personally sponsored the rebuilding of monasteries, invited respected monks to resettle in Thonburi, and initiated the copying of religious scriptures. His aim was to re-establish Buddhism as the unifying faith of the people. Beyond religion, Thaksin worked to restore civil administration. He reappointed court officials, revived tax systems, and reintroduced royal laws that had governed life in the Ayutthaya period. Where necessary, he adapted these institutions to suit the new context. His government maintained the traditional structure of ministries and departments, but placed trusted generals and administrators in key positions to ensure loyalty and efficiency. Thaksin's rule was not without controversy. As he took on increasing responsibilities, military, religious, judicial, he also began to adopt more assertive and sometimes authoritarian methods. Later in his reign, reports surfaced of erratic behavior, including claims of spiritual visions and excessive punishments. Whether these reports were exaggerated by rivals or reflected genuine strain is still debated by historians. What is clear is that his final years were marked by growing unrest within the court. In the year 1782, a coup led by one of his trusted generals, Chao Phraya Chakri, ended Thaksin's reign. Thaksin was arrested and, according to most sources, executed. His fall marked the end of the Thonburi kingdom, but not the end of his legacy. The general who overthrew him would become King Rama I, founder of the Chakri dynasty and the new capital at Bangkok, just across the river from Thonburi. Thaksin's legacy is complex. He is remembered as both a unifier and a restorer, a warrior and a reformer. Without his efforts, Siam might have remained fragmented and vulnerable to foreign domination. His military campaigns, administrative reforms, and cultural patronage laid the foundation for a renewed and modernizing Thai state. In the centuries that followed, he would be honored with royal titles, national monuments, and public holidays. The Thonburi period, though short, served as a bridge between the old world of Ayutthaya and the emerging identity of modern Thailand. It demonstrated the capacity of the Siamese people to adapt, rebuild, and preserve their cultural heritage even in the face of total devastation. The values of Ayutthaya, Buddhism, kingship, and national unity, were carried forward, transformed through necessity, but still deeply rooted in memory. The story of Ayutthaya does not end in its destruction. It continues in the resilience of its survivors, the leadership of Thaksin, and the legacy that shaped the Chakri dynasty and the present-day Thai nation. From its founding in the 14th century to its fall in the 18th, Ayutthaya was a kingdom of remarkable endurance, diversity, and influence. Its ruins stand today not only as reminders of loss, but as symbols of strength, renewal, and the enduring spirit of a people who refused to be erased by history.